What is up, everybody? Welcome to the Eddie Liger Power Hour. Got a really cool show for you guys planned today. We're going to be talking about theories of surplus value a little bit, which is Capital Volume 4, essentially. Always like to keep you guys up to date on what I'm reading. And then we're also going to talk about Trump and Elon splitting over Trump's big, beautiful bill. It's times like these where I wish I could do a good Trump impression. A great, big, beautiful bill. It's better than all the other bills. Nobody else could have come up with this. Nobody else is doing these things. It's big, it's beautiful, it's grand. All right, so Elon and Trump split over that. We're going to discuss that. And then we also have Stalin, a Stalin statue being put up in the Moscow metro. But of course, the main event of today will be reacting to the Russian Revolution oversimplified. People tend to really like those videos. Some of the most popular videos on our channel are me reacting to oversimplified or these sort of cartoon fake history channels. So we'll do one of those today that was requested by you in the Discord. So if you want to make requests that I react to on the show, be sure to join the Midwestern Marx Discord at the Midwestern Marx link tree. And if you want secret access to certain channels on that Discord, be sure to become a Patreon supporter at patreon.com/MidwesternMarx. But without further ado, let's play the intro and get right into the show.
High Sheriff Hazard is a hard man to be. High Sheriff is his only plan. He digs through pockets, takes what he can, for he's High Sheriff Hazard. He caught me one evening, and here's what he said: "You look like a Russian, you look like a red, and if you're fond of your skin and your head, beware the High Sheriff of Hazard."
All right, folks, let's get into it. What's been going on? Whoops, I almost dropped my iPad. In addition to reading theories of surplus value, I've also been learning to play chess recently. Duolingo added a feature where they'll teach you to play chess, not just languages. So I've been doing that a bunch lately. So if anyone wants to take me on chess.com in between doing my party work throughout the day, I'm down. I'm still horrible. I can barely beat the beginner chess.com bots that they give you that are like idiots and make ridiculous moves all the time that no rational human would ever make. But I still find a way to lose to them sometimes. So chess is great. Yeah, I feel like every Marxist has to play chess. I know a lot of wrestlers who like it too. It's a very strategic game. You've been doing Duolingo chess a lot as well. Nice. Yeah, it's way easier than Duolingo Spanish. Still got to keep on my Spanish grind, but definitely prefer learning chess or switching it up a little bit. Fresh haircut. Thank you, comrade. Yeah, I had to get the blonde hair chopped off. I got my sister's wedding coming up, and I guess her and her fiance thought that my hair should be one color for the wedding rather than two. So here we are. I wanted to do a mullet, but I'll do that next time. Even though there will be quite a lot to debunk in that oversimplified video, he at least doesn't have good things to say about the Tsar. That's good, yeah. There's a difference between, pure propagandists who like praise the Tsar and talk about how things got worse after the revolution versus people who are like, yeah, the revolution was good, but Stalin was bad. That's a pretty common lane to sort of fall in there. So I imagine that's where oversimplified falls in. But Chairman Mao used to play a lot of Go. That's based. Great haircut. Thank you. Yeah, my barber, the person who I always have cut my hair, I won't go to anyone else. I refuse, because I got so many bad haircuts from Great Clips and Sports Clips and all these franchises. But then I found a barber who actually was working for Sports Clips but left because she was being underpaid. Her work was more high quality than everyone else's, but she wasn't being paid for it. So she's like, screw it. I know I can cut hair better than these guys. I'm going to start my own business. So it's a little bit more expensive, but it's a small business. It's a barber who said, screw you to the franchises. And I like supporting her business. Not that I need to. She's very successful because nobody in my area cuts hair as well as her. But yeah, it always makes me feel good when I go to get my hair cut there. Knowing that I'm not paying into these giant haircut franchises that are ripping off their labor force. Even in high school, being anti-Stalin, when asked who was the most influential person of the 20th century was, I remember I said Joseph Stalin. Very cool. Thank you so much, Michelle Vincent Corbeau, for being a member for 7 months. Appreciate that. Super helpful. Long-time supporter. So yeah, become a YouTube member if you too want to access some of the perks that come with that, and become a longtime supporter of Midwestern Marx. But yeah, I mean, there's even liberal historians have argued that Stalin was the greatest leader of the 20th century. Not even just the most influential leader, but the greatest, or the greatest leader of World War II is an even more common theme. So yeah, it's something that you have to acknowledge, even if you're anti-communist. But thank you, Michelle. Appreciate you. So theories of surplus value. Some of you guys know that I finished the 3 volumes of Capital recently. They're up there next to my bust of Marx and Lenin. That was a grind. That was a mountain to climb, I will say. Read the first volume twice before I understood it, and then read 2 and 3. But then even beyond that, you have another 1,000-page book, Theories of Surplus Value, parts 1, 2, and maybe 3. I don't know if there's a third part. I can't remember. But that's basically considered volume 4 of Capital. But it's actually much easier to read, especially once you have the 3 volumes in your brain, right? It becomes much easier to digest what Marx is saying in the economic analysis. And what he's doing in Capital Volume 4, which I had no idea that this is what Theories of Surplus Value was, and I'm very excited to read it because it's right up my alley. He's going through all of the classical bourgeois economists, or the physiocrats who came before the classical economists, and explaining what they got right and what they got wrong, and how the theory of political economy prior to Marx helped build upon itself. And helped create the systematic Marxist analysis of capitalism. So he goes through the main works on all the main issues of political economy, and Adam Smith, David Ricardo, the physiocrats who came before them, and says, here's what was right and here's what was wrong. And we're going to take what was right, criticize what was wrong, and find out what's actually right. We're going to take their analysis further. Which is so interesting, and I studied economics in college. People know, like, economics is one of my main focuses. It's right up my alley. I find it super interesting. So the fact that there's this book where Marx himself is going through all of the major political economists of his era and criticizing them, or pointing out what their advancements were, what their innovations were, is awesome. I'm flying through Theories of Surplus Value. I love reading it. I think you could read it before you read the first 3 volumes of Capital, honestly. But if you read the first 3 volumes first, you'll be able to fly through series of theories of surplus value. So it's very interesting. Not a ton of new stuff is being laid out, but it's almost like Hegel's lectures on the history of philosophy, where he goes through the whole history of philosophy and how various philosophers built upon each other. It's like Marx doing that with political economy. So as someone who's been studying political economy the last 7-8 years, it's right up my alley. It's super interesting for me. Much easier to read than, say, volume 2, which is all this dense theoretical analysis and math. But yeah, there's also the Grundrisse, which is like the preface. So I'll finish Theories of Surplus Value, and then I'll probably hit the Grundrisse. I'm already like 200 pages deep in it, but I think I'm going to set it aside for now and read Theories of Surplus Value. But yeah, it's I remember when I first started out with reading, there was this big like trend on the left of like anti-reading leftists, anti-theory leftists, and it still kind of exists, but not as bad as it used to be. As the left has kind of unliberalized itself more over the past couple of years. But especially among TikTok leftists a few years ago, man, you could barely talk about theory without someone making a video about how, you know, you're showing your white privilege by talking about reading, because not everybody can afford to read or whatever. So that seems to have died down, but there's still this like anti-reading theme on the left in some circles, and like an anti-capital theme, like capital's outdated, you don't have to read Capital to be a leftist, just, you know, use your lived experience or whatever. And I mean, there is a kernel of truth to that. You don't need to read Capital, but if you read it, you will have a very good understanding of how the system works, and it will give you a good base of knowledge, and it'll make you more skilled in not only debunking anti-communist propagandists, but winning people over to communism, actually explaining to them what communism is. How are you supposed to do that if you haven't, you know, read the theory of it? So yeah, I did a video today on X, basically, or on TikTok as well, basically explaining what you should know before reading Capital. But I encourage people to take the dive. You know, you got to start somewhere, and the sooner you start, the sooner you can get it done. And it's not as hard as it's made out to be. It's really not. Right? Once you get the basics down, it's actually really interesting and really fun to read. The first 3 chapters of volume 1 can be difficult if you have no background information going in. But other than that, it's not that hard. I mean, says me who had to read it twice, but once you read it twice, on the second time through, you'll get a lot out of it. I guess I'll show the video here real quick, since I brought it up, and then we'll move on from this segment. But yeah, Theories of Surplus Value, it's great. Can't wait to keep sharing with you guys what I've learned about it. I'm tempted to go into depth about Adam Smith and the physiocrats and all that, but I'll save it for another video or another stream, because I don't want to spend 20 minutes talking about obscure political economists from the 1800s that people don't know, or 1700s, 1500s. But reading Marx, but eventually I will do that video explaining all of it. Marx's Capital can seem really difficult to new left-wingers or baby leftists, but I promise you, it's not impossible. I just finished the 3 main books, so let me give you one tip that I wish someone would have told me before I started. The first 3 chapters of volume 1 are notoriously difficult, but I think the confusion stems from one main thing. And that's that Marx uses 3 different forms of value which can get jumbled in your brain before you have a clear understanding of what they actually mean and the differences between them. So before you start reading, let me explain to you the 3 forms of value. First up, we have use value, which is a qualitative form of value, meaning it can't be measured in numbers. Use value is the usefulness that a product or a commodity gives to its buyer. If I purchase a hammer, I can now use its use value, which is pounding nails. Commodity that's completely... Sorry about that, folks. I was trying to type in the chat and I must have hit one of the hotkeys. If it's going to be sold on the market. Nobody's going to buy a commodity that's completely useless. And the use value of a product can be relative based upon the person buying it. I don't see much value in $1,000 dirty shoes, but a really rich person who wants to pretend they're working class might see a lot of use value in this. Exchange value, unlike use value, is quantitative, meaning it can be measured numerically. The exchange value of a commodity is how much that commodity is worth in relation to all the other commodities on the market. And this value is expressed in the commodity's price, which is what makes it numerically comparable and exchangeable with all other commodities. If the price or exchange value of my speaker here is $30 and the price of my guitar is $60, that means that two of my speakers are worth one of my guitars. If I sold two of my speakers on the market for $30 a piece, I would then have $60, which I could use to purchase the guitar. And without this value, exchange, or the entire capitalist mode of production itself, would be impossible. We would have no way of knowing how much one commodity is worth in comparison to another. Well, that is unless we looked at the commodity's value, the third form of value, which is the most confusing of the three. When Marx says value, full stop, he's talking about the amount of socially necessary labor time needed to create a certain commodity. And this form of value is measured in time. If on average throughout the entire American economy it takes 1 hour to make this guitar, the value of the guitar is 1 hour's labor time. If it takes half an hour to make the speaker, the value is half an hour's labor time. And a commodity's price, its expression of the Lane 2006 here says the ruling class obfuscates use and exchange value, conflating them both. Absolutely. This is what the whole utility or subjective theories of value are based upon. The idea that a commodity's usefulness is actually what gives it its price. People's willingness to pay for it is what creates its price, which means its usefulness. And this is not accurate. If you trace the amount of labor time in every industry to the price of every good from that industry, they correlate by about 94%, which isn't 100% because prices are inflated in industries where there's a natural monopoly like oil, where all of the resources are controlled by a handful of companies, which allows them to artificially inflate prices. But generally, it's corollary to labor value, whereas this subjective theory of value, this idea that supply and demand are the only things that determine value, which is an age-old bourgeois trick that existed when Marx was writing. He debunked that thoroughly. It's something that can't be measured. It's something that can't be tested, right? You can't measure consumer demand and how that correlates to price. You can't quantify it, but you can quantify labor time and price. And when Paul Cockshott put them in a chart, he found that the amount of average labor time that goes into producing a commodity strongly correlates to its price, the same way that David Ricardo and the classical economists who adhered to the labor theory of value thought that it would. So this is one of the big problems. I see people talking about David Harvey in the chat. I like David Harvey. I like his Capital series. I used it when I was reading Capital, but there are some huge problems with it. For one, the anti-China stuff. But for two, the abandoning of the labor theory of value. He basically cedes the labor theory of value to the bourgeoisie, to the ruling class, which is a huge mistake, and sort of removes the entire scientific basis of the Marxist analysis. So I actually see that as a glaring problem that almost makes me hesitant to recommend David Harvey's Reading Capital series. I actually think the series that PSL put together, that Dr. Derek Ford put together, is superior. And I love David Harvey. He's brilliant. I love listening to the guy. But when it comes to beginners, people who are just setting out learning Marx, you don't want to abandon the labor theory of value right away. That's a huge mistake. So watch Paul Cockshott's video on why the labor theory of value is right, at least, before you use David Harvey's reading guide. The exchange value is very closely correlated to the commodity's value. The more labor that the capitalist has to pay in order to produce a commodity, the more that commodity is going to cost. So to review, use value is what the commodity actually does concretely in the real world for the person buying it. Exchange value is an abstract form of value that commodities have in relation to other commodities. And value is the amount of socially necessary labor time that's needed to create a commodity.
Goes to his back after landing
And
a
if you
kick.
understand these three forms of value and that they represent three distinct different things, I think that reading Capital Volume 1 will be a lot easier for you. Once I understood this, the notoriously difficult first three chapters became three of my favorite chapters in the whole book. They're absolutely brilliant if you can understand what the three forms of value actually mean. So hopefully that helps a little bit. I think the most confusing part, and this is why I did that video, the most confusing part of the first three chapters of Capital, which are notoriously difficult, are the fact that Marx keeps saying value, 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 and he explains what the three forms of value are, but it's pretty dense and complex, and it can be difficult if you don't know that he's explaining three different kinds of value. It can be difficult to know that value in and of itself is different from exchange value and use value, that these are all distinct things. So if you know that going in, I think it'll make things a lot easier. Base lesson. Thank you. I think that'll make things a lot easier to understand it. And the more you get into it, the more that you realize these categories are necessary. Once you understand Marx's economic categories, you can debunk almost any bourgeois political economist that you hear, even today, right? Because a lot of what they do is, as Lane 2006 was saying earlier, a lot of what they do is conflate exchange value with use value, and you can explain, no, these two things are different. These are different categories, or they'll conflate profit with surplus value. That's something that Adam Smith did a lot, which Marx says, no, you need to subdivide profit, interest, and rent, which are forms of surplus value. They're subcategories of the category of surplus value. And if you get these categories confused, it leads to inaccuracies in the analysis. And this is very Hegelian, right? Hegel talked about categories and categories that are opposites of each other. Or a category that has two different counteracting poles within it, which causes it to change. So bringing in Hegelian philosophy to political economy is what helped Marx to solve a lot of the problems that classical economists had been dealing with for years. And that's why Lenin says it's like French utopian socialism combined with English political economy combined with German philosophy. That's Marxism in the simplest sense. You bring in the philosophical analysis to make a thorough analysis of political economy. So philosophy helps Marx create his method, the dialectical materialist method, and then he applies that to political economy. And that's what allows him to bridge the gap that Adam Smith and Ricardo were missing. That, along with the fact that he wasn't a propagandist, right? Ultimately, Smith and David Ricardo were from the bourgeoisie. So they were always looking, even though they were more honest than modern economists and they adhered to the labor theory of value, they're always trying to explain away exploitation. They're trying to explain away the fact that surplus value comes from unpaid labor from the working class. So you needed a socialist. You needed someone looking from the standpoint of the working class to say, no, the capitalists aren't making all of this profit because of their frugality and because of their innovativeness and because they're just superior people. They got it through violence and exploitation, and they accumulate more and more every day through exploitation, through unpaid labor, and keeping the working class in their place. So learn the categories, learn the economic categories. I promise it's worth it. It'll change the way you see the world. It might sound over your head and too complex for now, but you can get the hang of it. I like the PSL one too. Yeah, it's good. It really is good. Derek Ford is one of those people who's in I have my criticisms of PSL, but I've always said there's some really good people in the party, like Kai Pritzker, who works for Breakthrough News, or Professor Derek Ford. He really is a brilliant guy, intelligent. Brilliant and intelligent mean the same thing. Nice guy. Does a lot of good work, and he did that reading guide, and I think it's great. There's a lot of defenses of China in there, explaining how China doesn't divert from the main principles that are laid out in Capital. I mean, I love David Harvey. like I said, David Harvey's a legend. He's been teaching Marxism for 50 years in America and in Europe. Shout out to him. But he literally says that Deng Xiaoping never read Marx or never read Capital. Because he's like, if Deng Xiaoping really understood this, I don't think he would have done what he did. It's like, come on, man. Obviously, he understood it. The dude was exiled in the Cultural Revolution multiple times. The dude was part of the revolution alongside Mao. His reform and opening up policy was based on Lenin's NEP. He had a very, very, very strong grasp of Marxism, which is why he was able to do what he did and become the father of modern China. But big facts. But yeah, I don't want beef with David Harvey, man. He's a genius guy. I've learned a lot from him. Shout out to him. Oh yeah, one more thing before we move on. Here's the cockshot video that you should all watch. I think I've watched this video maybe 25 times, literally. I've watched this so many times. Because he shows how the supply and demand theory is untestable, whereas the labor theory of value is testable. So he gets the labor inputs of every industry here and the average price of the goods in every industry and finds a 94% correlation, which of course it would be 100% if it wasn't for natural monopolies, which can artificially inflate prices. Right. There's a difference when you have like Gucci bags, right? There's what Baudrillard calls sign value. Marketing and branding can inflate a product's value among the ultra rich. But as far as the core industries, the main industries that make the world run and that require necessary labor to reproduce society, the price is largely corollary to labor. And people always point to those outliers, like, what about those golden goose shoes that look like they're covered in shit but go for $1,000? That's not the average, industrial product. The vast majority of exchanges in the economy are not brand name luxury goods that can be artificially inflated through branding. So check out this video. It's quite brilliant. Paul Cockshot's taught me a lot about political economy. He's engaged a lot with the Austrian economists and the neoclassicals, right? Kind of doing what Marx does in theories of surplus value, but for the modern day. We've had so many economists who have come after Marx who Marx wasn't able to dissect. So Cockshot takes the Marxist analysis and applies it to these post-Marxist economists in a way that I think is brilliant and that more people should be doing. And that really helped me as somebody who, kind of began by studying political economy. So, there were all these neoclassical economists saying socialism's dumb. You're an idiot if you believe in socialism. Here's what's ECP, and Cockshot debunks those and helped my young mind see why these people were just ideologues on behalf of the ruling class. I had a feeling communism wasn't that bad when I was in high school. Nice. Yeah, that was probably earlier than when I started questioning it, but yeah, I was pretty stupid for a lot of years, so forgive me. You were ahead of me. All right, let's check out our first reaction video of the day. So, one of the things you'll hear on TikTok if you talk about communism, which I've done a time or two, is that you should go talk to people who actually lived under communism. My grandmother lived in Romania in 1995, and she said communism was horrible. And you say, well, communism fell in Romania in 1990, so your grandma lived under capitalism. But okay, there's a lot of people who actually say that, communism was terrible in the 90s. Like, well, you were living under capitalism after communism was torn apart and all the industries were auctioned off for pennies to multinational corporations. But okay. But anyways, it's complete bullshit because in almost all of the post-Soviet states, other than the ones who hung on to their central economic planning and their socialist economics, there's a huge nostalgia for communism, for socialism. There's a common saying in Russia, like everything they told us about communism was false, but everything they told us about capitalism was true. Because when capitalism came, their lives got way worse. Their universal daycare went away. Their universal employment went away. Their universal housing and healthcare and all these necessities went away. And yeah, you could get rich if you exploited others. There was more freedom to exploit others and get rich off the backs of your workforce if you were a capitalist. But for the working class, it meant far less freedom. And they realized everything the communist government told them about capitalism was true. It was a horrible system that threw people into massive poverty. And there were thousands and thousands, I think over 100,000 deaths of poverty, over 1 million even. Some estimates have said deaths of poverty at the time. People just, who were used to having universal employment and who were used to having all of these protections just went away overnight, and they were thrown into the individualistic competitiveness of the capitalist free market, the labor market. So nowadays, Stalin is more popular than he's ever been, much more popular than Lenin, even non-communist Russians see what he did, and they appreciate it, how he stabilized the country, made them wealthy, industrialized them, and defeated the Nazis. So I think that's why we're seeing this Lenin statue go up. But let's take a look at it. Comunismo. Thank you, Starside. Appreciate you for the $8, brother. Comunismo. Solidaridad.
In Russia, not only do people not know what the future will hold, they don't know what...
Yo, hold on. What? We have to pause. Time out. Does anyone know why I saw a guy at work yesterday with a red shirt, yellow letters that said GOP, and the hammer and sickle was in the O? I was very busy and didn't get to ask him. That is bizarre. I think maybe he's a liberal. I've seen a lot of liberals recently telling Trump that he's a communist, and a lot of more bourgeois Republicans. I mean, all Republicans are bourgeois, but the ones who are just like pure ideologues on behalf of Wall Street, who aren't on the Trump train, they have started calling Trump a communist, right? Saying he's trying to do central economic planning, which is communism. The tariffs are communism. Everything bad is communism. It could be that, or maybe he's a MAGA communist. Maybe he's like an infrared fan who's trying to reach MAGA working class people with the immortal science of Marxism, Leninism. Let's hope it's that one, but I don't know. Maybe he's a liberal.
What the past will hold. The past here is constantly changing. So I'm going down into the Moscow metro because somewhere here, deep underground, a ghost of Russia's past has reappeared.
It's a British journalist, by the way. And this is like, what a good visual example of the legacy of communism that still exists in Russia, right? Like they induced Russia with shock therapy. They tried to completely de-Stalinize and decommunize, but like they were communists for so long. Right, you can only do so much to erase the legacy of communism and the achievements of communism, like all of the public transportation, which still has hammers and sickles on it. And this is like a representation of the Russian government, even, right? They're a capitalist government. You could describe them as an oligarchy, sure, but there's been a massive crackdown on the oligarchs recently. There's been a return to all this central economic planning. There's been of course, the military operation against Ukraine when they were taken over by fascists, right? You're seeing the legacy of the USSR shine through in modern Russia all over the place. This is just like a visual example. Thank you for the super chats, guys. I'll get to those as soon as I'm done with this video.
And there he is. Joseph Stalin, a brand new statue of the Soviet dictator. Now, there was a time after his death when all the Stalin statues in Russia were removed, were knocked down, when Stalin's cult of personality and his crimes against the people were officially condemned. The Great Terror, the millions sent to the Gulag, the hundreds of thousands of people executed.
The Gulags! Just like the horrible dictator Joe Biden. who oversaw 23% of the world's prison population in a country that only makes up 5% of the world's population, who uses those people for cheap prison labor, the dictator Joe Biden and his gulags.
But Stalin monuments have been popping up again all over Russia. Today the authorities are focusing on Stalin, the strongman, Stalin, the victorious wartime leader. Stalin is being rehabilitated. What do young people today think about Stalin?
Well, I think that Joseph Stalin is unfairly hated.
Based?
He did a lot to our nation that we still use.
There was, of course, the Stalin terror, and many people suffered in the gulags.
About this point of view.
The gulags? The gulags? What an easy point to respond to. There were people in prison. Oh, wow. Wow. We Americans would never know what that's like to have a bunch of people unfairly in prison. Under capitalism, you're far too free to ever go to prison and end up being a firefighter in California being paid $1 an hour.
We cannot blame only Stalin because it was a system.
Как я могу относиться, если я в России живу? Сталин — это наша история.
They cut him off right away. I'm sure he had more of an explanation than that.
Поэтому...
Ну, спорный человек, да? Типа миллионы жертв там ГУЛАГа.
Ну, бывает такое, что мы же все как бы не без греха.
Well, it happens. Nobody's perfect. They're just sick of the bullshit. Oh, yeah, prisons. Yeah, we still got those today. Well, at least he industrialized our country and beat Hitler's ass.
Поэтому в те времена, видимо, это было необходимо так поступать. Поэтому было принято такое решение. Это его выбор.
А еще...
Мы подчиняемся.
Безусловно, он был тиран, тем не менее, как лидер он проявил себя. Но, опять же, да, в каждом человеке есть что-то хорошее и плохое. И вспоминая репрессии, вспоминая вот этот тяжелый период 30-е годы, в личности Сталина.
Imagine if Khrushchev never gave the secret speech. Imagine if he would have just been disciplined and not an opportunistic turd. And he didn't sow all this bullshit about Stalin that has been repeated by the Western propaganda media. And Russians even have been beat over the head with for the last 3 decades to, 10 decades. Not 10 decades, but the last 7 decades. We've been beat over the head with anti-Stalin propaganda. No, they always use Khrushchev's secret speech. It was such a gift to the capitalist imperialists that Khrushchev gave them. Here, just talk a bunch of shit about communist leaders and say they were evil. Look, even their own people thought they were evil. See? Me and Trotsky. What a gift. What an idiotic move by Khrushchev that just really screwed the entire communist movement after him globally. Not screwed it forever, but, really forced us to have to do a lot of work to rehabilitate Stalin. And this was, one of the main reasons that the Chinese didn't like him. They considered it to be national historical nihilism, just shitting on the people who came before you and who built up the society that you're living in, which is much better than the society that Stalin inherited. So, Khrushchev, major L, buddy.
Конечно, это печальная часть истории нашей страны.
But it's not just Joseph Stalin who's making a comeback. So, would you believe, is the USSR. I'll explain how a little bit later. But I mean...
Based! USSR 2.0 incoming, baby!
The Soviet Union. It's long gone, right? It fell apart more than 30 years ago. There's even a museum dedicated to it here in the center of Moscow. I've just been to take a look.
I was just at a store like this in St. Petersburg, Florida.
Выдохнуть, вдохнуть, выдох, вдох, продолжайте.
It's a real Aladdin's cave, or perhaps I should say Lenin's cave, full of the sights and the sounds and even the smells of a country that has passed into history. And yet, just a few days ago, one of President Putin's advisors suggested that legally the USSR still exists, because when it was being dissolved, allegedly there were procedural violations.
Based procedural violations. It was a coup. It was a coup, sir. They drove tanks to and fired missiles or fired shots at the Duma. It was an absolute capitalist coup, and then they were induced with capitalist shock therapy that led to hundreds of thousands of people dying from poverty. Procedural violations is an understatement.
And he said that to try to make out that Russia's war in Ukraine is an internal matter for Moscow. And then a former Russian prime minister came out and backed him up. Just over there by Red Square, there are some ultra-nationalists who agree and who want the Soviet Union back.
Ultra-nationalists? Sounds like communists to me. They ultra-nationalists if they're calling for the USSR 2.0? Most of the Russian nationalists that I know are anti-communist and they just support the Russian Federation and they actually want Russia to become like an empire. I don't know any Russian nationalists who support the USSR version 2. Nice hat, though. Big fan of that hat. I wonder if he got that from Jackson Hinkle's merch store. The borders of 95, let's go. These people really do want the USSR 2.0. Let's go. All you Central Asian countries, all you Baltic countries, get ready. It's time. Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia, you guys have had your chance. You became like angry Nazi states that are yelling belligerently even though you're tiny and can do nothing. You have statues of like SS soldiers around. You've lost your opportunity. We're giving you back to Russia. Sorry about it. Ukraine also became a fascist state. Sorry. We got to do the USSR 2.0. You had your chance. You did fascism. You lose your opportunity now.
Если завтра появится или скажут, что СССР вернулся, вот как вы к этому отнесетесь?
Я не думаю, что это реально в нынешней ситуации политической, потому что каждая страна...
I'll do it again. The ghost of Lenin is that goofy meme saying, I'll do it again.
Которая была когда-то республикой, да, входящей в СССР, в данный момент тоже достаточно автономной, самостоятельной. И захотят ли они опять создать этот союз? Но, мне кажется, нет.
They should want to. It would make them way stronger. It's Haas had a good post about this the other day on X. Like, people have a tendency to think that small nations are good, whereas big nations are bad. But if you think about it, what China and Russia, or China and even more so the former USSR, represented was a union between all of these different nations. And even the United States is this. And this is why we used to be such a revolutionary country at our founding. Because it was based on the principle of e pluribus unum, out of many one, meaning, you know, you're all part of this country, you're all part of our community, if you give your labor to the community and if you live within this community. It doesn't matter what religion or what race or what ethnicity you are, we're bound together as one. So it's a much more collective thing to have a giant country that encompasses many different national, ethnic, and religious groups like Russia, China, and the US. And then these small states, like the Baltic states, that are considered like heroic crusaders against Russian imperialism and communism, are like Nazi states. They're like narcissistic Nazi states that are always talking shit, even though they can't do anything. They're tiny and have like 4 people in their military. And they're always talking about the evils of communism while people are, you know, living in poverty in their current society. And you just get like these little like narcissistic mini Napoleon complex states. Like the Baltics are the best example, you know, or Ukraine under the leadership of these like fascist militias. And or even Zelensky himself kind of embodies that like individualistic narcissism that a lot of these smaller countries have. And it's much easier for like or Israel, right, to be an ethno state or a fascist state, because if you just have one nation, one religion, one race, you know, and you say we don't want to be part of the USSR, we don't want to unite with any other races, we need to be our own thing. People cheer that on like it's a struggle for independence, but it's actually like not a left-wing nationalist struggle, but a right-wing nationalist struggle, an ethno-nationalist struggle. And you never see like a giant ethno-nationalist superpower. It's always these little states like Israel. So a union of a lot of these countries would actually be great. You not through imperialist means. But imperialism doesn't create unions, right? Imperialism busted up Yugoslavia. It doesn't unite countries. It doesn't unite different groups. It dumps money and guns into the ethno-nationalist groups, into the crazy terrorist extremists who wanted to tear Yugoslavia apart and make it a bunch of small little narcissistic ethno-state countries. And I say, no, Yugoslavia, when it was united, when all those different ethnicities were united, that was more progressive. That was more left-wing, right? Imperialism doesn't try to unite different countries. It tries to balkanize them so they're easy to prey upon and exploit. So we shouldn't necessarily be against the union of a bunch of countries, right? The Soviet autonomous republics were based, and even if there were difficulties with bringing socialism to like the countries in Central Asia where they had a real backwards culture and capitalism and industry hadn't developed at all, the amount of wealth that was brought to those places is insane. The amount of wealth that was brought to Azerbaijan and Armenia by the USSR is absolutely insane. They became rich as hell because the USSR gave them, not to exploit them, but to allow them to get rich, gave them to the machinery to extract the oil and other resources that was under their soil. So it was good for these countries, even if fascists want to claim that it wasn't.
I'm not saying we're definitely going to wake up one morning to find that the USSR is back.
I hope we do.
But it's interesting that the idea is being planted. And it's interesting, too, how the past is being reinterpreted, remolded here, under the influence of current events, the war in Ukraine, confrontation with the West, the push for patriotism.
This is all very true. Everything you say in here is true. The war in Ukraine, the increase of patriotism, this is all pushing Russia to be more like the USSR. The crackdown on the oligarchs from Putin, the nationalization of industries, reinvesting those industries in Russian development. They're being pushed by Western imperialism to become more Soviet-esque, for lack of a better word.
Now, Moscow accuses the West all the time of rewriting history. What's happening here does feel like an attempt by the Russian authorities to reshape the past, to try to justify the present.
No, it's an effort to dig up the truth. It's an effort to say, screw this, we're not going to be part of NATO. The West doesn't want us as an ally. The West wants us as a colony. So the communists were right about that all along. Right? And we're going to become more like them because that's how you fight imperialism. The way to fight capitalist imperialism is with communism. So even if they're not saying that explicitly, that's the direction that they're moving in practice, because they're realizing the realities of what Stalin and Lenin and all these early communist leaders taught about capitalist imperialism and neoliberalism. Well, neoliberalism's a newer thing, but... All right. Shout out to whoever sent me that video on the Discord. That was very good. I'm glad I picked that one. I was going to pick some random video about the Stalin statue, but I'm glad I picked the one that was actually sent to me because that was very interesting to listen to the British journalist perspective. Obviously, he's a bourgeois journalist, but he said some interesting things that were worthy of responding to. So yeah, shout out to whoever sent that. Michelle Vincent Corbeau, thank you, comrade, for the $5. Eddie, if I wanted to read Marx's Capital, which translation or edition should I buy for the best results? Would you recommend any complimentary reading too? I would ask Chris Morlock about the translation. I don't know so much about which translation to pick, but Chris has been a Marxist much longer than me, and he knows a little bit about that. So you could ask him. He's on X at Chris Morlock. He'll probably respond to you if you shoot him a DM. He's a very helpful guy who wants to help the new generations learn Marxism. So I don't know about the translation, but the complimentary reading, you could do David Harvey's Capital Companion if you keep in mind the things that I said about it earlier in this stream. Because besides the things that I pointed out, it's pretty decent. You could also do, and also David Harvey creates a map of Marx's Capital and how value flows through the economy. And I find that map to be extremely useful. I wish it was printed in every copy of Capital. So that's where, David Harvey is brilliant and why I don't want to like shit on him too hard when I criticize him, because he's done so many helpful things. So you could check out the map of capital accumulation or whatever that he made. But then PSL actually is many criticisms as I have of them. Their Liberation School did a pretty good one with Derek Ford, a reading guide. But really, just engage with the text itself, right? Try to just engage with Marx himself. I would honestly like maybe just read it one time through without any companions or reading guides, or maybe only use the reading guides when you're really stuck and you don't know what Marx is actually trying to say. You could also use AI. You know, you could just, I keep AI open when I'm reading, and when I have like a research question, I just type it in and get a bunch of other secondary sources that I can read from. So that's another good option. Just be like, what does Marx mean when he says this? And have AI explain it to you. It might not always be right, but it's better than nothing. So yeah, I've been using ChatGPT for research a lot lately. It's useful. You just have to ask ChatGPT to give you a source for whatever information it's giving you. Don't just trust it. You know, look at whatever source they're giving you, but it's pretty good if you do that. It's like a good source gathering tool. For the haircut, thank you, Louis. I appreciate it. My barber appreciates you too. Nothing I despise more than British liberals who pronounce Putin as Putin. 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 Yeah, isn't that how Piers Morgan says it? I don't even get it. Putin. 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 Beans on toast and Putin. Vladimir Putin. Read anything about the ancient world and the development of Greece and Rome. Michael Hudson especially. Yeah, there you go. Michael Hudson is complimentary reading. I like that idea from the chat. That'll be like, nobody is updating Marx's analysis for modern day more than Michael Hudson. Nobody is applying dialectical materialism to the modern economy the way that Michael Hudson is. So it'll help you know what has changed in the economy since Marx, right? And it'll help you apply Marx's analysis to what's going on right now, which is very useful. So I check that out. Absolutely. All right, so Trump. Oops, I copy pasted the wrong video. But Trump and Elon recently split. So Trump, oops, I hit the wrong button. Trump is pushing his big, beautiful bill, or whatever he calls it, which will solidify the tax cuts from his last administration. It'll make it, there's a bunch of horrible stuff in this. Like, it'll kick a bunch of people off their insurance. It'll make it so there are job requirements for Medicaid, kicks people off SNAP. There are some other things that are even worse than that. Like, the student loan plan was really bad, like getting rid of student loan forgiveness and making, being more strict with people's repayment plans, basically hounding them for their money that they owe because everybody's drowning in debt. So instead of fixing the debt, which is this country's main problem, he is exacerbating it and saying you have to pay back this debt on time or we're sending the IRS after you. But there's also some things like they wanted to create a government pension fund or something like that. I don't know if it was a pension fund, but like an early childhood fund for new parents. They want to increase tax credits for new parents. They're trying to fight the declining birth rate, I believe, by doing a form of central economic planning, giving more tax credits to people for having kids. So there are some decent things in there, but Elon Musk is against this because he says it will increase the federal deficit, which it definitely will. Not that it really matters, but it will put us more in debt, which is what he claimed to fight against with Doge. So he's against it to the point of tweeting out that people should call their representatives to fight against the bill and request that their representatives vote no to the bill. So he is explicitly going against Trump and even trying to mobilize his base of support to fight against something that Trump is trying to get passed. So this is a huge split between Elon and Trump, a huge falling out here with a lot of implications. So very, very interesting to see Elon coming out so hard against this. And who knows what the real reasons for Elon coming out against this are. I don't know if he really cares about the deficit. He could, right? Because he's been criticized recently because the debt is continuing to go up, as it always does, even though he promised to get rid of the debt. And he's been criticized for that. And, you know, he cares a lot about his public image. So maybe he is trying to just go against this bill so it helps his public image. I don't know. But I feel like a lot of his supporters now are Trump people, and he'll probably piss them off by going against Trump. So who knows what he's doing? Who knows?
We are following some breaking news. Elon Musk is blasting a massive spending bill backed by President Trump.
In a social media post, Elon Musk called the bill a, quote, disgusting abomination that will increase the deficit. He went on to say of what's known as the Big Beautiful Bill, shame on those who...
How funny is it that it's called the Big Beautiful Bill? Oh, Trump is such a meme. He's literally a meme president.
Voted for it. You know you did...
Whoops.
Wrong. The post comes just days after Musk was given that send-off in the Oval Office for his time leading the Department of Government Efficiency.
NBC News White House correspondent Von Hillier joins us now with the latest. Von, how are the White House Republican lawmakers reacting to these comments from Musk?
Right. Well, this happened just 5 days ago, Elon Musk leaving Washington, yet clearly on his social media platform, he's making it clear that his opinion isn't going anywhere. And this comes at a very, very difficult time for these.
Love to see divisions in the ruling class, of course. Of course, this is only good for us. I wasn't able to make a video about it today. I ran out of time, but I want to make a video explaining every part of the Big Beautiful Bill that's good, every part that's bad, and then pointing out that Trump and Elon are mad at each other. Because we want to incite those divisions in the ruling class. We want them fighting each other. We want complete anarchy among the ruling class as we become more organized and more disciplined among the working class. We always want our enemies to be in disarray. Class struggle is war.
Negotiations. And that's why I want to let you hear from Speaker Mike Johnson, who is one of those Republicans that is looking for this big reconciliation package, which includes the major GOP tax cuts, cuts to Medicaid, cuts to SNAP, but also increased spending on the military.
Unlikely but interesting possibility. Musk, disillusioned with the left and right, stumbles on the ACP and turns to MAGA communism. Yes, the way to get him to do that is through Grimes, the singer. Grimes has flirted with communism in the past, and I think Elon was like, quit talking about communism, and she stopped and made this post like, I'm not a communist or whatever. But we can win over Grimes, and then we can use her to win over Elon. I think they have a kid together. Elon's got like 8 kids with like 8 different random women because he's a disgusting pig. But yes, we could do that. And this is such a classic Republican bill. Like, we're going to increase defense spending by $150 bajillion, but then we're going to cut SNAP. We're going to cut food funding for like single mothers by $100, you know, to fix the deficit. Like, you just increased a ton of spending to the most bloated budget in the entire country, the military budget. But you're going to take $10 away from single moms or people on welfare, and that's going to fix the deficit? The hell are you talking about? That's so typical Republican. We need to be fiscally responsible, except for when it comes to the military. Then we need to increase taxes and give them more.
Military and border enforcement and the Trump administration's mass deportation efforts. All of that is in this package. I want to let you listen to the speaker respond to Elon Musk.
With all due respect, my friend Elon is terribly wrong about the one big beautiful bill. We had a long conversation yesterday. He and I spoke for, I think, more than 20 minutes.
Why is he wrong? Why is he wrong? Why? Do politicians ever explain why? Did they ever give actual arguments for anything? Did they ever give an actual reason for anything? Never. It's just like ad hominem attacks or laughing off their critics like they're a bunch of idiots. That was when I read Xi Jinping's governance of China for the first time. I was like, imagine having a leader of your country who is this intelligent and who laid out in detail in a book for the entire public how he's going about governing your country, the goals of your country in every single sector. Right, that book is 2 or 3 parts, and it's giant, and it lays out China. It lays out comprehensively China's system of governance from the words of their leader himself. Like, how amazing would it be to have a leader who's that bright and who's that transparent and who's that honest with you about what the country is doing and has that comprehensive of a plan for the country's future? These people are just a circus. You know, Washington, D.C. is all the real policy is made by Wall Street. And then everything else is just a reality TV show. And that's why they never have substantive policy arguments. And think of the dumbing down effect that has on our population. The fact that all politics is just this circus. It's just these different personalities arguing with each other and attacking each other and never actually giving an intellectual, reasoned argument for anything. Our whole population thinks this is why people say they hate politics, or why some people who don't know shit call themselves political junkies. Because it's just like, are you invested in the reality show or not? And most people in America are smart enough to look at CNN or MSNBC or Fox News and be like, this is so stupid. Why would I even put my energy into this? It's just the same thing over and over and over again, and there's no substance to it. So people just completely check out. That's the effect that it has. Or you have these people who are political junkies and all they are is partisans. They're people who watch CNN all day and just stew in their hatred of the other side, of the Republicans, and sit with their own moral superiority that they feel for being liberal. Or you have the Republicans who think that the Democrats are like demonic lizard people and everything they do is evil and they're coming for you and your family and your kids, and the Republicans are defending you. You know, there's a small portion of people, these political junkies, who think like that. But a lot of people just see this shit and check out. Like, there's no substance here. 300 million from SNAP, 800 million from ACA and Medicaid to pay for 1.1 trillion in tax cuts for anyone making over 500K. Yeah. It's just typical Republican, you know, and it's so disgusting from Trump. You know, the guy who was going to bust up the Republican Party, the populist, the guy who was turning the GOP to populism. Now he's just doing a Ronald Reagan style tax cut. No more Medicaid, no more SNAP. We got to fix the debt. And then he turns around and gives it all to the military or to the ultra wealthy, who are Trump's buddies.
Minutes on the telephone for him to come out and hand the whole bill is to me just very disappointing, very surprising in light of the conversation I had with him yesterday.
In White House,
that's funny that Elon told him that he was in support of the bill, or that they had a big conversation about it, and then he came out on Twitter and shit all over it. Elon is such like an antisocial, like teenager in a grown man's body. You know, he probably didn't have the courage to tell the speaker what he actually thought of the bill in person, but then he went to Twitter and bashed it. Red Maze, thank you, comrade, for the $5. Appreciate you, brother. Yes, I need to message you back. I messaged you on Discord. I think you told me that the original message was on Twitter. I couldn't find your original message, but yes, the ACP media department wants a drone so we can get overhead shots of like our marches and our events. We've been accused of using AI to edit in new members and make it look like we have more members than we actually do, which is ridiculous. But I think some sweeping shots of what we're doing with a drone would be extremely, extremely, extremely useful for us. We would obviously do it legally and make sure to check up on the local drone regulations and stuff. But that's the main thing that the media department wants to invest in right now. So if you have an extra one that you're willing to give away or sell for cheap, that would be extremely helpful. So I have to hit you up. You know what? I'm going to write it down right now because I don't want to forget. But thank you for the $5, and thank you for the offer. I will definitely be hitting you up so we can plan that out behind the scenes. I'm sorry that you had to send me a $5 super chat in order to get my attention so that you could send me something else. But we appreciate you always, comrade. Thank you. I will get back to you, I promise. Sorry it's taken so long. From bleached Kyle hair to a military cut, I'm convinced that he is a hair shapeshifter. Give me 20, soldier. Let's go. I love it. I'm tempted to just drop down and do 20 push-ups right now. I would if I had room. Thank you, Joey, for the $5. Yeah, I like to mix it up, different styles all the time. You know, next time it'll be a mullet, business in the front, party in the back. But right now it's all business. This haircut does remind me, when I look in the mirror, I feel like I'm back in college wrestling again. Like, this is how I would cut my hair when I was competing. So that's what it reminds me of. Like a fight. If I ever fought MMA, this is how I would cut my hair, I think. This or a mullet. I need the mullet, though, to ingratiate myself with the Midwestern working class even more. Thank you, everybody, for the super chats today. Should we watch another one of these quick? David Packman covered it.
Elon Musk is unraveling, and we now have new details about what happened behind the scenes. It seems to include a physical fight. But before we get to that, during what was supposed to be kind of just a routine interview about technology and innovation and his involvement with Doge, Elon Musk didn't like being asked about policy. He gets a question.
You do look like Timothy McVeigh now, feeding the schizos. Yeah, that cat dad guy is going to be... he's going to be on me about that. There's some schizophrenic guy named Cat Dad who thinks I'm Timothy McVeigh. There's nothing you could say to the guy. You can't reason with him. He's convinced I'm Timothy McVeigh, so that's not going to help. Potensic Adam for $179 on Amazon. Wow, Red Maze. That is an incredibly generous donation to the party. I don't even know what to say. On behalf of the entire party, thank you very much. On behalf of the leadership, thank you very much. On behalf of the rank and file, thank you very much. This is going to go a long way in producing the kind of content that we need to be producing to win people over and to get people aware of what our party's doing. We're going to use it at every single ACP event from now on, including some of our like local community cleanup events. To show people what we're doing. So your money will not go to waste. But that is incredibly generous. Thank you. I was making plans to save up for the drone, planning how we could take some money from Midwestern Marx, maybe fundraise or whatever to pay for it. But now in one fell swoop, it's done. So it takes a ton of work off of my plate. Everybody give a round of applause to Red Maze. Thank you, Red Maze. Solidarity forever. Huge W, man. Huge W. So now we got a drone, folks. The ACP media department has a drone. Just imagine how much that's going to increase the production value of our event videos. If we can have these giant sweeping shots of everybody doing work on the ground, man, I can see it now. It's going to be great footage that we can use in all of our videos. So I'm going to grab my notebook real quick because I don't want to forget the type of drone that you're telling me. But thank you, Red Maze. You're the man. I'll be back. Give him an Ingalls roll. Yes, the Ingalls of our party. I wish there was some kind of... gift I could give in response. Like I wish I could give you permissions or like gift you a free Midwestern Marx membership or something. I don't know what to give you, but what I'll give you is a bunch of badass ACP videos that help advance the class struggle. And every time you see an ACP video that has a sweeping drone shot, you can know that you had a part in it, and you can feel good that you're doing your part to advance the struggle of the working class in America. Potensic Adam, $179 on Amazon. All right. Probably buy that tonight, honestly. Thank you, Red Maze. I'm going to stop mod. There you go. I don't know if I can do it from here. You've been a part of our crew for a long time, Red Maze, so you should be a mod anyways. But thank you, comrade. I'll stop saying thank you now. I've been saying thank you for like 10 minutes. I'm not a huge fan of like being given stuff for free because I feel like overly grateful. I feel like, but thank you so much. It's just my dad's the same way. You're a mod now, Red Maze. You earned it. So now if you pay me $200, you can become a mod too. Just kidding. But what was I saying? Oh, my dad's the same way. He has a hard time being gifted stuff for free because he feels like too grateful, like he didn't earn it or whatever. But because this is on behalf of the party, because this is something that's going to go directly to party work, I feel a little bit better about it. So thank you so much. De nada, comrades. Solidarity forever. All right, I got completely distracted there. I had to answer that super chat. I couldn't just keep talking about Elon Musk while there's $200 for an ACP drone sitting in the chat.
And he says, let's only talk about spaceships. The reporter says, but I was told I could ask about anything. And Elon goes, no.
But the interview didn't get off to a smooth start.
I noticed that all of your businesses involve a lot of components, a lot of parts. Do the tariffs and the trade wars affect any of this?
Tariffs always affect things a little bit.
Wondering what your thought is on the ban on foreign students, the proposal. I mean, you were one of those kids, right?
Yeah, I think we want to stick to, the subject of the day, which is like spaceships, as opposed to, presidential policy.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I was told.
I just told the media department, guys, we got the drone. Everybody's having a celebration right now. I better turn my notifications off because everybody is pumped.
Anything's good, but
we were like planning ways to save up for it and shit. Let's go.
No.
Oh man, these people are such snowflakes. It's not even a difficult question. It's like, hey, you're an immigrant from South Africa. You came to the U.S. to attend college. By the way, he then, while he was supposed to be studying, was working, which technically means he was here participating in activities which he was not legally cleared to do. He could have simply said, I support legal immigration, or I think America benefits from global talent. And I think Donald Trump is just kind of cleaning things up, and then we're going to get back to that. Instead, he panics and he goes, oh, you're not supposed to be asking me about that, which just comes off so flaccid and pathetic in these interviews. And of course, Elon chose to spend the last year and a half wedging himself into American politics. A free speech warrior, Trump-aligned guy, and Doge turning X into a conspiracy echo chamber of the right wing. Someone asks him a basic policy question. You came here from another country. Your companies benefit from foreign workers. You were a foreign student.
Geez, Red Maze is just going all out now. We can get one. That's 4K at 269. Absolutely. Thank you for that. I would have just paid that part myself, brother. You've done more than enough, but thank you so much. I will get a high quality one. Even if I had to throw in some of my own money, I'd be totally cool with that. But thank you so much. $285 now from Red Maze. What a dude, W. See, I hear my phone going off over there because everyone in the ACP is super pumped about this. So ACP rising, Red Maze rising. Thank you, comrade. Real Deng Xiaoping hours. Deng is zillionaires in the chat today, folks. You are the angles of this cause. So based, man. Thank you so much. I'll pull up what you think we should get.
Trump wants to ban foreign students. Seems like an obvious question. He goes, oh, you're not supposed to be asking me about that. Now, later in the same interview, Elon launched into an unprompted rant about government overreach. So it's not that he doesn't want to talk about politics. It's he only wants to talk about politics in a way that he determines is convenient for him.
So I assume this is the one, the 269. Yeah, this looks freaking awesome. Can you control it from your phone? That's cool. Yeah, this is what we'll get. Don't worry if, don't pay for shipping or anything. Let me handle it. You've done enough. Thank you so much, comrade. Soon this will be in the possession of the ACP. Con gusto. A pleasure, comrade. Sorry to distract. Have a good night, comrades. I'll listen in. Thank you so much, Red Maze. Please don't apologize. We're super, super grateful for this distraction and what it will mean for the future of our party videos. So thank you so much. I promise we will put it to good use. Wealth is communism. Absolutely. Thank you so much, comrade. Okay. I'm going to stop thanking you now, but just know that from the bottom of my heart, extremely grateful. And on behalf of the entire party, which is made up of hundreds and hundreds of people, all busting their asses to advance the class struggle, they're all saying thank you, as you can see in the chat right now. So appreciate you, brother. Hell yeah. Hell yeah, guys. Let's go. ACP rising.
Of the government is that like the government is just like the DMV that got big. Okay, so like when you say like let's have the government do something, you should think, do you want the DMV to do it?
And then Musk started talking about the Trump administration.
One of my very first TikToks that blew up was dismantling that argument. It was some girl from PragerU, and I ratioed the shit out of her. She was like, she was actually responding to one of my videos where I said all of our industries should be nationalized. And she was like, yeah, I would like all our industries to run just like the DMV. And I was like, a nationalized industry is not like a government-run public service. And also the DMV works pretty well, despite being, all of our public services being underfunded because billionaires are always trying to make government cuts. But if the DMV was private, it would work way worse. They would be price gouging you on everything. You'd have to pay more for your license. You would have to pay more for everything. You'd have to pay just to visit. And the way it works right now is fairly efficient. I know people don't like being stuck at the DMV, but the DMV in my town is awesome, right? In bigger cities, it can be a little slow and the workers can be a little mean. But in my city, it's not like that at all. It's amazing. Nobody minds going to the DMV. The workers are nice. They get you in and out of there real quick. And if it was private, imagine how much worse it would be, how much they would price gouge you and how little they would give a shit about actually, giving you the services that are needed. So completely ridiculous argument. The DMV in my city is pretty good too. I've heard a lot of people say that. When I made those DMV videos, I had so many comments like, I don't mind the DMV. The DMV works well in my area. And people were like, yeah, thinking about if the DMV was private, they're like, that would suck. Salute to Red Maze. Thank you, Joey. Appreciate the $2 super chat. Yes, salute to Red Maze. Joey is another ACP member who's been busting his ass on the ground. So he's one of the people who will benefit from that incredibly generous donation.
I hadn't even asked him about Trump.
And it's not like I agree with everything the administration.
You majored in econ? That's awesome. We got to talk about that sometime. I love talking with econ majors, and this is sad. Really sad. My friend, my old wrestling teammate, who was an economics major who helped tutor me in college when I got into it, he passed away recently. He died of a heart attack in the middle of the night. He was young, he was healthy, in his mid-20s, healthy. He just randomly had a heart attack and didn't wake up one night. So, sorry, that got really dark and really deep really fast. But that was what popped into my mind. I got like emotional for a second there. I got tripped up. Because thinking about how I need more people that I can talk about economics with, like not just Marxist economics, but like mainstream bourgeois economics that you're taught in college. That was what I loved talking to my friend about. He wasn't a communist, right? But he gave me, he had the bourgeois perspective, and I could test my own ideas against him by debating him. So I need more people who studied mainstream bourgeois economics that I can talk about it with. He didn't get the shot. No, he was a conservative guy who didn't get the vaccine. That was the first thing I wondered as well. But my grandson had one at 21. I'm so sorry to hear that. Yeah, it's crazy. It's a reminder, though, life is short. Like any day really could be your last day, even if you're healthy and, have all these things going for you in life. Nothing is a given. Which is why it's so silly that we have to, spend all of our lives saving money so one day we can retire and maybe have some free time. even though some of us will never get to that age, right? We should be enjoying free time our entire lives. We should be enjoying free time when we're young and healthy, or when we're middle-aged and we're raising our families. It shouldn't just be when you're old and, on death's door that you get to stop pinching pennies, in order to survive and in order to save for later. Yeah, that's one of the things that made me think about a lot, was like, man, we spend our whole lives saving money for retirement. And some of us, just randomly get hit by a bus someday and never get to retire. We just wasted all that time pinching pennies, wasted all that money that could have been spent on experiences with the people we love or whatever. It's such a shitty thing that capitalism does to our entire class.
Administration does. So it's like, I agree with much of what the administration does, but we have differences of opinion. There's things that I don't entirely agree with. But it's difficult for me to bring that up in an interview because.
Thank you so much, Red Maze. I'm glad we inspire you. No worries. I get that some people are too busy to join the party, but the next best thing is funding the party and helping us acquire resources to do the work that we need to do. So appreciate you for doing everything that you possibly can from outside the party, and hopefully we can continue to inspire you, and hopefully these new videos we produce with your help will and continue to inspire you. We'll continue building up our communities. We'll never stop. Even if I was going to say we'll never stop until we're dead, but even if they take one of us out, the rest of us will keep fighting. So we'll never stop, period.
Because then it creates a bone of contention. So then I'm a little stuck in a bind where I'm like, well, I don't want to, speak out against the administration, but I don't want to. I also don't want to take responsibility for everything the administration is doing.
Let me tell you what this is. This is a guy who is terrified of regulation that will affect his businesses and turning any of Donald Trump's attention on his.
Yeah, I think Pacman's actually right here. I think he's actually correct, because this is what I was saying earlier when I said I'm sure there's some underlying thing that is bugging Elon about Trump's big, beautiful bill. And I think he's worried about not, because his companies receive millions and millions of dollars in government subsidies. They're completely propped up by the government, like most giant corporations are today, because we essentially live in a socialism for the rich. The Wall Street basically centrally plans our economy on their own behalf. So a lot of these corporations are propped up, and Elon, all his corporations would go under if it wasn't for the welfare that he gets from the government, these subsidies that he gets from the government. So I think he's terrified of those going away. And I don't know if the big, beautiful bill has, any teeth to it or could hurt Elon in any way. But I think that is what's really underlying his split with Trump, is he's worried about his position as a welfare queen being, to use the bourgeoisie's word against them. He's worried about having that position taken away, his favorable position where the government props him up, which is probably one of the reasons he got close to Trump in the first place. It's why Zuckerberg and Peter Thiel and all these oligarchs are now sucking up to Trump after supporting Biden forever, because they want to maintain this position where the government props them up and acts favorably towards them.
Companies. Tesla, SpaceX, Neuralink, Starlink, X, formerly known as Twitter. These are all companies that are under scrutiny, some for potentially violating labor laws, some for safety rules, platform responsibility. The NLRB, the SEC, the DOJ, they've all turned attention at different points in time to companies led by Elon Musk. And Trump has made it clear he would gut those agencies. And so what we're witnessing here is a billionaire sucking up to a strongman authoritarian because he doesn't want to be held accountable while pretending to care about free speech. And this has become the billionaire playbook, bigger picture.
Broken clock, as Joey said, because I've criticized Pacman a lot, right? His centrist liberalism really bugs me. The fact that he pretends to be a left-winger while being a neoliberal and being a complete arm of the Democratic Party, or a complete mouthpiece of the Democratic Party, while pretending to be basically a socialist. That being said, I think he's right about this. I really do. Broken clock.
Because the tech CEOs like Elon have realized something. Trump will let them do whatever they want as long as they support his authoritarian agenda and don't speak out publicly against him. And that's why they try to avoid speaking out.
That could be true as well. You know, Trump could be using the state basically to bring these billionaires in line, which, you know, I'm not against on principle. Obviously, I think that the state should be used as a tool to crack down on the ruling class once the working class seizes power of that state. But Trump is just like using it for his own interests, right? Basically saying the billionaires who suck up to me will be spared and will maintain their favorable position, whereas the billionaires who go against me, you might have your subsidies cut off in the name of fixing the debt, the same way that you've taken away people's welfare checks and SNAP and Medicaid for the last however many years in the name of fixing the debt.
About again,
my dad had his union busted and his pay cut in the name of fixing the debt, which then inflated by like $1 trillion. Shout out to Wisconsin's Governor Scott Walker, the puppet of the Koch brothers.
And student visa bans or abortion restrictions or climate denial. Now, Elon may have made a mistake by saying actually the tax bill that Trump wants is completely anti-Doge, and I don't love it. But the sort of greater value here is Elon Musk doesn't give a damn about democracy.
Yeah, this is true. People should read the 18th Brumaire of Louis Bonaparte. I read that recently, and the parallels between Trump are extremely, extremely strong. He is a Bonapartist. I think that's the perfect explanation. And it's not, you know, history repeats itself, but it's not the exact same. The conditions now are much different than they were in France at the time, but it's a very, very similar thing with this sort of authoritarian bourgeois leader.
He wants deregulation. And when he's asked even the most basic question, should immigrants be allowed to study here? Should they be allowed to come here? He goes, oh, you're not supposed to ask me about that. It's like a cheap solar panel just folding. But when he wants to assert politics as convenient, he will do it. This is a guy who's terrified, and we have to talk about the physical altercation we just learned about. When it was time for a new mattress, I didn't want to gamble on something generic.
When it was time for a new mattress, I hit up the MyPillow guy. What is that guy's name? Mike something. Mike Lindell, the MyPillow guy. When I needed a new pillow, I went to the MyPillow guy because he proves that capitalism works. When he needed a new pillow, he invented it. Do you think that could happen under socialism? No. For those who don't know, it's an inside joke. I had an economics professor in college who that was literally her argument for capitalism was the MyPillow guy from Fox News. And she's like, see, capitalism breeds innovation because he was poor and broke and an alcoholic, and then he needed a pillow, so he made one, and now he's rich. Wow, yeah, that settles it. That proves it. And she was an actual professor. Gosh, she was so dumb.
I had heard about.
She won office this year, actually, which is scary. That person is in office. Just a wild person on a personal level too, as well. Like she would dress up as Barbie for Barbie's birthday every year. I don't know, to celebrate capitalist consumerism and commodity fetishism or something. But it was like a woman in her 40s would dress as Barbie and come to school and teach class dressed as Barbie on Barbie's birthday. I'm not saying you can't enjoy Barbie or enjoy things, but like, what the hell? What the hell is going on here? I would accept it and be like, do you, if you weren't telling me that Mike Lindell, the MyPillow guy, is proof that capitalism works. She was so arrogant too. You just scream at kids about how socialism's awful and with Fox News talking points and just talk over them. One time she told me, she's like, I don't want you to think that I was just talking over you because students have accused me of doing that in the past and it's not true. I'm like, but what if it is true though? What if you do that to everybody? And the reason students are complaining about it is because that's what you do. You're not actually having intellectual conversations. You're just shouting Fox News talking points before they can make a substantive rebuttal. But whatever. Holy shit. Wow, the people are generous today. Holy cow, how much is that? 50 Midwestern Marx memberships. Thank you so much, Michelle. Holy cow. Everybody in the chat today is going to get a free membership. Holy cow. That is so generous. I already like used up all my thanking the audience for like an hour straight on Red Mage, but now we got to do it for Michelle too. This is so cool. I hope everybody who gets those memberships enjoys them. I love when people gift memberships because I know they're sharing the love with the rest of the audience and giving them the perks that come with a membership. If you're a $10 member, you can get Carlos's book, The Purity Fetish and the Crisis of Western Marxism, by the way. You get a bunch of like emojis or whatever that you can use in our chat if you're a member. So be sure to take advantage of those perks. But thank you so much, Michelle. This is awesome. Red salute. Once again, we're all extremely grateful. All the super chatters today, extremely grateful for you guys. Obviously, we're a completely people's funded institute. We get no outside funding, no corporate funding. It all comes from you, the viewer. So this kind of stuff is extremely helpful to helping us continue to put out content, increase our production value, do things like the theoretical journal that help deepen class consciousness in this country. And we try to transform the money that you give us into class struggle, right? We like to think even if you can't, be part of the ACP and be doing work on the ground every day, if you gift to Midwestern Marx or Infrared or the ACP itself, we will take that money and use it on your behalf to advance the class struggle. So I feel a real duty in that sense with all the money that comes into Midwestern Marx. Like this isn't just, I'm not just an influencer who's taking this money to get rich, right? People are giving me this money so that I can use it to advance the class struggle. That's how I see it. And yeah, I like to tell people that if you can't join the ACP, give a few bucks to Midwestern Marx, Infrared, or the ACP, and we will use it to continue the work that everybody knows is so important. So thank you so much, Michelle. I won't blather on for another 20 minutes thanking the chat, but just know how much I appreciate you guys and waking up every day and working our butts off for you and for our communities and for the American people. So without you guys, we would be nothing. Right? Midwestern Marx is more than just the leaders. It's a collective. It's a community. It's a community of communists who are actually looking to change things, not just a bunch of communists who want to sit around all day and have a leftist social group like other streamers that I could call out right now, but I won't. It's a community of people who are actively working and actively seeking the best way to transform this country for the better. So couldn't do it without you guys. You are the basis of everything that we do. Red salute forever. Big W. When will you open a wrestling dojo? If I keep getting super chats like this, I'll probably open a wrestling dojo soon. Red Gym's coming soon, funded by the Midwestern Marx super chatters. Free to all Midwestern Marx members or card-carrying communists, or maybe union members too. That's my dream, to open red gyms all across the country and train people in martial arts for free. It's basically what I do now. My club, it's not free, but it's $100 for 3 months. My wrestling club, you could train for 3 months with like one-on-one work and like a lot of instruction for just $100. Try to keep it as cheap as possible to help the community, but if we can make them explicitly communist gyms that are actually free or state subsidized, that's the goal. Community of communists. Hell yeah, baby. I will teach kung fu. I will hit you up. We need classes in all the martial arts, like a beehive. Yes. Bees together strong, bees alone weak. All right, guys, we better get into the main event. I did not expect to go this long before getting into our main video. However, it's time for everybody's favorite, reacting to oversimplified, reacting to YouTube history channels. Everybody loves these videos. They always tend to do well on our channel. These history videos, these nonsense history videos, bourgeois history videos, where they have like, they're well produced and they have cartoons and graphics, and you can tell that quite a bit of money was spent to produce them. They're extremely popular and they're extremely effective in implanting people's brains, especially young people, with a very bourgeois, very imperialist narrative about history and about world history and world events. So I think it is worthwhile to go through these and debunk them, explain the communist version of history to people, which is the realistic version of history, the version of history actually rooted in evidence and material analysis. So this should be an interesting one. We've got the Oversimplified channel here, who we've reacted to before, and they are talking about the Russian Revolution. So let's see their oversimplified explanation. Possibly the greatest event in human history. Pop history, yeah, that's what I called what these guys do.
By NordVPN. Click on the link in the description below to get an amazing 68% off a 2-year plan. Also, commemorating the weirdest bromance in history. Get your new character pins and Russian Revolution merch available now. Link down below. Hey Jimmy, it's the 1800s, an exciting time to be alive. Why don't you get out there and explore the world? Gee whiz, Mom, thanks. This place is amazing. Where am I? Why, you're in France, my boy. Here we come up with wacky new ways of running a country. Liberty, equality, fraternity. Whoa, welcome to the United Kingdom.
Based French Revolution?
Here we invented the train. Oh, aboard! Holy smokes! You're in a German factory, my friend. Here we harness fire and coal to create all these sexy lederhosen. This is incredible. I can't wait to see where I'll end up next. Where am I? You're in Russia. Have I gone back in time? No, this is just how it is. Are you a farmer? Worse. Technically, my landlord owns me, which makes me a serf. I'm scared. You should be, because I haven't eaten in 4 days, and you look pretty tasty. Hey!
So far, based. All right, that was a good way of explaining the difference between the West European countries and Russia at the time. West European countries, industrialization, capitalism is setting on, feudalism is in its last, legs, are pretty much fully abolished by this point, actually. By the time Lenin comes about, feudalism's basically done, and the bourgeois mode of production has fully established itself in West Europe. England is the hub of industry. France doesn't have as much industry, but they have a giant financial sector, all these giant banks, much more commerce and development than Russia. And Russia is still a semi-feudal country. Capitalism is emerging, but they're like 200 years behind. It's a semi-feudal country, or a majority feudal country, with all these peasants who, as they said, were basically owned by the landlord.
Jimmy, how are your travels? I hate you! Russia in the 19th century, feudal, underdeveloped, and stuck in the past. While the rest of Europe had been modernizing and improving their citizens' lives, Russia's rulers were taking a different approach. My lord, we're falling behind the rest of Europe. It's time to industrialize, give the people rights, and share your power. Russian czars had no time for pathetic ideas.
Bruh, that was awesome. So far, this video is great.
Falling behind the rest of Europe. It's time to industrialize, give the people rights, and share your power. Russian czars.
Finally, an accurate representation of how the Tsars reacted to people who wanted development. If you listen to Russian nationalists or like Russian monarchists, they'll tell you that Stalin did nothing, Lenin did nothing, Russia was developing like that anyways. But more honest historians, even anti-communist historians, will tell you, no, the Tsars were absolutely holding the country back, sending the Russian people to fight and die in these endless wars of conquest, spending all of their money on these stupid wars as the rest of the world was developing and industrializing, and Russia was lagging behind. The Tsars were absolutely a complete fetter on the development of Russian society and the Russian economy. No bazooka technology at the time. True, ahistorical. There were no bazookas.
Czars had no time for pathetic ideas like liberty and modernization because they were too busy having the time of their lives. While the serfs were breaking their backs in the fields, the Tsars held all the power, and they didn't have to listen to anyone. Want to run the country like a backwards feudal kingdom while the rest of Europe outpaces you militarily and economically? Go right ahead. Want to keep the people uneducated so they don't get any ideas? There's no one to stop you. Want to keep...
You know what's funny? This is what's happening to the US now with China. China's outpacing us because they have this more advanced economic system, because they have more advanced relations of production, and the US is lagging behind. As the ruling class parties it up, the country continues to decay, the infrastructure decays, the people fall further into poverty. We continue to lose these foreign engagements overseas. Countries in Africa are having coups and throwing out all of their, Western military occupiers. People are turning against Israel and beginning to side with Palestine. The empire's in decay, and Wall Street and the ruling class, as they always do historically in revolutionary times, are just partying it up. Doing let them eat cake. Totally disconnected from the plight of the working people on the ground. So it was the same thing in Russia. You had the czars partying it up while they were holding the country back, while feudal relations of production and the monarchy completely held the country back and allowed all these other countries with more advanced relations of production to surpass them. Because if, for those who are new to Marxism, Marxism isn't just, anti-capitalist full stop. It is anti-capitalist. I almost hesitate to say that because it is anti-capitalist and a, systematic critique of the capitalist mode of production. But Marxism recognizes that capitalism was a step forward out of feudalism and slavery. The French Revolution was a bourgeois revolution. The capitalist class, with the help of the working classes, overthrew the monarchs, and feudal relations of production, peasant, serf, landlord relations of production, were replaced with capitalist relations, wage labor capitalist, which was an advancement and which allowed these countries to industrialize and develop faster. But the mistake that people make is thinking that the capitalist system is eternal, that eventually the capitalist system won't also be outdated and outmoded by new relations of production, which is what China understands that the US doesn't, which now puts us in a situation like Zarist Russia, where the ruling class is partying it up as the whole country decays, because we have backwards relations of production, which have been outmoded by the development of the means of production.
Keep exporting grain even when there's a massive famine causing hundreds of thousands to die? That is your God-given right. While all of this was great for the Tsar, if you were literally anybody else, it probably sucked because Russia was falling behind. If they were to keep up with Europe, they'd need a strong ruler with some big ideas. Oh look, here comes one now. Hey everyone, it's me, Tsar Alexander II, and I've got some big news. I'm releasing you all from your serfdom. You're all free. Yes! Yep, I'm the best. Oh, there is one thing though. I spoke to your local lords and they weren't happy about losing all their free labor. So as a compromise, you're all gonna have to pay them back a near impossible amount of money for the next 49 years. Expect your lives to barely change. Okay, bye.
Shout out to the people who say that the Tsar ended feudalism. It wasn't Lenin and Stalin who ended feudalism, it was the Tsar. It wasn't Lenin and Stalin who industrialized, it was the Tsar. They learned from their mistakes and started taking Russia forward. And we need to bring them back. No. They were pressured to do a symbolic ending of feudalism by class struggle. Right, all of the discontent with the monarchy that existed among the peasants and among the people forced the Tsar to make this symbolic gesture against feudalism and more symbolic gestures towards industrialization. But as the video explained, it wasn't a real abolition of feudalism, a real reinvestment in industrialization, the way that the Bolsheviks did. It was just trying to give lip service to the peasants who were super angry about the current situation, which is how political change always comes about, right? This is Marxist theory as opposed to great man theory. It wasn't just the Tsar deciding to do this one day. It was the class struggle and the material conditions that forced the Tsar to change his position towards more industrialization and less feudal relations of production.
Now I know what you're thinking. This Tsar Alexander II seems like a pretty cool guy. He's trying to reform the country and get Russia on the right path. Everyone must love this guy, right? Wrong. Why does one man get to decide the fate of everyone in the country? This whole system is dumb. Somebody should do something. Like what? Like kill the Tsar. You're gonna kill the Tsar? Well, me? No. I'm busy. I was kind of hoping you'd do it. Okay. See? The people love me. They're throwing flowers, confetti, and high-grade explosions.
Is that Trotsky? Why is Trotsky bombing the Tsar? Or is that Lenin's brother who was hung for trying to assassinate the Tsar?
Okay, Nicholas, your grandfather has a mild case of being blown up by a terrorist, and he's not looking too hot. So we're gonna go say our goodbyes, okay? No, it'll be too scary for him. Nonsense, it won't be scary at all. We're just gonna say...
Why did they make him look like Trotsky? That's just confusing.
A quick goodbye. Ready?
Boy, look at me. The people did this to me. And one day, they'll do it to you!
See? Wasn't scary at all. So Alexander II was dead, but luckily, they had another Alexander lying around, Alexander III, and he felt his dad's reforms had weakened the Tsar's authority. Russia was massive, and as a result, had many ethnic minorities. Non-Russians, more interested in their own cultural heritage than in loving me? Isn't it great? So much...
Oh, it was Alexander the Third who Lenin's brother tried to assassinate? Okay, yeah. It just confused me because they made the assassin look like Trotsky. I don't know why they did that, but maybe they ran out of little figures to use and just repurposed the Trotsky one. It was anarchist, yeah. Go figure.
Beautiful culture and diversity in our great nation. Alexander thought all these minorities should be a little more Russian, and thereby loyal to him. So he repressed religious minorities. He repressed non-Russians. He introduced the Okhrana, a secret police force that repressed anybody who thought having a czar was dumb. If Alexander...
What? But I thought the communists brought secret police forces to Russia. I thought it was only the KGB.
The second was the great reformer. Alexander the Third was the great repressor. Now that's how you run a country. Hey, Dad? Ugh, great. It's my son Nicholas, who I like to call a girly girl because he's so weak and pathetic. When are you gonna grow up? You still look like a girly girl to me. But Dad, I grew a beard. Yeah, an ugly girly girl beard. If Nicholas was to one day be czar, he needed his dad to teach him how to run the country. But his dad instead suggested that Nicholas go somewhere else. So Nicholas went to Japan, got an edgy dragon tattoo, had his head sliced off by a policeman, and then came home. Now will you teach me how to rule? I suppose it's time. Okay, there's a lot you need to know before becoming czar. Uh-oh. What? I've got kidney inflammation.
Thank you, JS, for the membership. Appreciate you, comrade. Enjoy the perks that come with being a Midwestern Marx member.
Oh, no. Upon his father's death, a totally unprepared Nicholas II ascended to the Russian throne. He wasn't a reformer like his grandfather, nor was he a repressor like his dad. Nicholas was Nicholas. Timid, easily swayed, and more interested in doing whatever the hell this is. Or this. Or this. He wasn't ready to rule, and he himself...
What the hell was that? I never seen those pictures before.
Wasn't ready to rule, and he himself swayed, and more interested in doing whatever the hell this is. Or this.
What in the world is going on here?
Or this. He wasn't ready to rule, and he himself admitted it, saying, I'm not yet ready to be czar. I know nothing of the business of ruling. Bit of an awkward time to bring it up. However, Nicholas firmly believed that he was chosen by God to be Russia's big daddy. And while he doubted his ability to rule, he was going to give it his best shot. And hey, who knows? Maybe he wouldn't be so bad after all. To get things off to a good start, Nicholas promised free pretzels and beer to a huge crowd in Moscow to celebrate his coronation. So enticing a proposition to starving peasants that the ensuing stampede left nearly 1,500 people dead. What the hell happened? We're not sure, but you're scheduled to go party with the French at 8 o'clock. Shouldn't I stay here out of respect for the people? When have Russian czars ever...
So he was Travis Scott before Travis Scott. He threw a concert and there was a crowd crush and a bunch of people died. Sounds like Travis Scott's Astro World tour in Russia.
Respected the people. Nicholas's decision to go party with the French immediately tarnished his image. Some were calling him Nicholas the Bloody. The Tsar's...
Yeah, it is a stupid art direction, but I'm not going to lie. The bazooka scenes and the scenes of Tsar Nicholas crying all made me laugh pretty hard. And the scene where Alexander I got bombed. All of those were kind of funny, I'm not going to lie. But you're right, it's tacky. We need Travis Scott ACP World. Yeah, I don't know if that would be good optics except for the crowd crush, but whatever, I'd be down. I get those goosebumps every time.
Had been partying hard at the expense of the people for long enough. They'd emancipated the serfs, but failed to lift them out of poverty. They used their secret police to crack down on anyone who might criticize them, and they'd failed.
You got the serfs sleeping on the roof. That's kind of funny. Sleeping on the roof. I don't know. Maybe I'm easily amused.
Secret police to crack down on anyone who might criticize them, and they'd failed to modernize and give the people rights, something the rest of Europe had begun doing over a century ago. The rule of the czars was quickly becoming outdated, and more Russians began wondering if there was a better way. For many, the solution was simple. Just look to the West. Republics, democracies, and constitutional monarchies galore. But a small growing group rejected that for an even better idea. A little something they called communism. Take Vladimir Lenin, an intelligent member of Russia's middle class.
Beast!
And also, a massive ill-tempered jerk. If you disagreed with him about anything, he wasn't afraid to call you out. You fat-headed, simple-minded vapid...
Sounds like being honest. Sounds like doing what nobody can do in liberal bourgeois society where we're taught to not actually talk about disagreements. You're actually literally taught never talk about religion and politics, right? It's impolite because we don't know how to have disagreements and actually have substantive discussions where we stand on business. And that was Lenin's whole thing. He was honest, right? He was honest with people about his criticisms. That doesn't mean he was a dick about it all the time, but he told them what he would actually think. And that's a lot more honorable than someone who goes around all day lying to people because they're too scared to say what they actually believe. That doesn't make you an ill-tempered jerk.
Big cockeyed imbecile. Tenderheart Bear is a far superior Care Bear to Bedtime Bear.
And he was no stranger to political unrest either. His older brother was executed for plotting to kill the Tsar, and Lenin himself was expelled from university for participating in a student protest. But how did Lenin go from being a middle-class nerd to the arbiter of socialist...
And he was one of the most intelligent people in his university, by the way. He was top of his class.
...divinity? Well, to tell that story, we first need to go back a few decades to when a man named Karl Marx wrote a manifesto explaining how capitalism is a system whereby the stinky...
Yep, that's all he wrote, the manifesto. Ignore capital and the Gundriss and theories of surplus value. It's only, 4,000 pages. Just ignore all of that and let's focus on the 30-page party pamphlet, for sure.
Bourgeoisie oppressed and exploited the working masses, and that only through class warfare could the workers rise up and instate a communist utopia. Now go back forward a few decades to Lenin reading that manifesto and loving it. But
Che had that too. He absolutely did. Che Guevara would not conceal what he actually believed. He considered that to be liberalism. He would tell people to their faces, even his friends, even Fidel himself, tell them exactly what he thought. And he wasn't a dick about it, right? And if the party decided to do something different than what he thought, he would follow democratic centralism. But he was open and honest in his debates, which is something Mao talks about in Combat Liberalism, how concealing what you actually believe can lead the party to decay because it allows you to miss things that you should be fixing, or it allows things to continue that are wrong because in order to not offend anybody, you're refusing to point it out. This is why even the executive board of the American Communist Party, we try to be incredibly honest with each other and tell each other when we think that someone's making a mistake.
publicly admitting you loved Marx and not Russia's big daddy would get you the cruelest punishment imaginable. Exile to Siberia. Enjoy exile, where you'll live with your wife, chill around town, and secretly write socialist newspapers. Hey, that doesn't sound so bad. And your mother-in-law is going to live with you. No! Once Lenin finished his stint in Siberia, he left Russia for Europe, where he was free to hang out with other Russian Marxists and talk about how great communism was. Now today, you might hear the word communism and think of this.
Did they call communism a utopia? I missed it. I didn't realize that, but once again, asking people to read Socialism, Utopian, and Scientific and understand how Marx and Engels specifically distinguish themselves from the utopian socialists, who are a much different thing. You just don't understand what you're talking about if you say that. You associate communism with Elon Musk, free healthcare as something scary, public housing, and Bernie Sanders shooting laser out of his eyes. Yeah, I don't know about you guys, but that's what I think when I hear the word.
But that's not how intellectuals living under a tough Zarist regime saw it. To them, communism promised a land where all were equal, where workers weren't exploited, and even people like you could get a girlfriend. So Lenin joined a party of Russian communists living in Europe, and he found...
Facts. No more incels under communism.
...founded a communist newsletter that...
Nick Fuentes and all his fans will be forced to go outside.
...was smuggled into Russia to try to radicalize the people. However, not everyone in the Socialist Party agreed with Lenin. In fact, they disagreed with him on a lot of issues, and Lenin was so uncompromising that he caused a split in the party. During one conference, a heated debate broke out, and Lenin was unwilling to give an inch. You pig ignorant...
It wasn't just him. It wasn't just him, and it wasn't him being uncompromising. It was him sticking to the basic principles of Marxism that the Social Democrats were going against, that the Mensheviks were going against. And guess who was proved correct in the end? Guess who the Russian people chose to follow in the end, in the October Revolution, in the second revolution of that year? The Bolsheviks. So Lenin, because of the way that history progressed, was proven right. The whole of Russia got behind the Bolsheviks instead of the Mensheviks. So clearly he was correct to make this split. It wasn't just because he was an asshole. It was because he stood on business. And this is something that's so looked down upon in Western liberal societies, as we've been talking about. Right? People who actually stand on principle and stand on business and actually tell you what they think, that's considered bad manners in Western society. It's completely bourgeois and liberal, and this is why Mao talks about it in Combat Liberalism. There's nothing wrong with standing on principle. There's nothing wrong with telling people what you think. Now, that doesn't mean you don't listen to what they think or you don't take it into account, or you don't have a sort of dialectical back and forth conversation. It doesn't mean you think you're right about everything and never think that you could be wrong. But Lenin was just asserting the basic principles of Marxism, which Kautsky and these other people began to abandon. And of course, he was proven right in the end because the Russian masses chose to follow the Bolsheviks.
Half-witted, fatuous morons! Cereal is a soup!
Listen, Lenin, you're a smart guy, but you have no idea what you're talking about. We're out of here. All in favor?
And they were proven wrong.
Of cereal being a soup? Hey, would you look at that? We're in the majority. So Lenin set up his own faction within the party he called the majority, or Bolshevik if you're speaking Russian. And the other faction became known as the minority, or Menshevik. And oddly, the majority were often in the minority, and the minority in the majority. The Mensheviks were less radical, whereas Lenin wanted the Bolsheviks to be loyal to him.
The Mensheviks were more rich. They were more intellectuals. They were more pansy asses who weren't willing to do real work on the ground and didn't have the same connection with the working class that the Bolsheviks had. Which is why, when the revolution came, the masses followed the Bolsheviks, because they did have the support of the majority, whereas the Mensheviks didn't.
And his uncompromising ideas. And if you weren't loyal, well then you're gonna get a big brain beatdown. Mensheviks worried that Lenin's attitude could lead to a one-man dictatorship. But come on, does this guy...
They actually show this to kids in school is what hits me. Yeah, it's sad. They show PragerU to kids in schools too. It's like, holy shit, what a miseducation. What a shame that is. Going to school to get educated and then you get shown this.
Guy look like a dictator to you? For now, Lenin remained in Europe, writing his socialist newspaper and impatiently awaiting an opportunity to overthrow the Tsar and bring communist utopia to Russia.
Not a utopia. Engels wrote an entire book on it. Please learn just a little bit. Just to learn the basics before you make a whole video about something, please.
Cool.
And this is the other problem with trying to pump out a bunch of oversimplified history videos on a bunch of different topics. Like pumping out weekly videos, you never actually get to dive deep into those topics. So you're just giving like a Wikipedia version of history about a million different things, rather than going in depth about one thing.
The hat. Who the heck are you? I'm definitely not a Russian secret police officer spying on Marxists. Oh crap.
No, there were no secret police officers. Only communism has secret police officers. You're telling me Zarist Russia had secret police? No way. That's a communist thing.
I don't want secret police watching me. Then you, my friend, should use NordVPN. Do you like having your identity stolen? If yes, you need therapy. If no, you need NordVPN. You can now get... Now, that's communist... Now, where was I? Oh yeah. A timid, easily swayed czar, a massive ill-tempered jerk, impatiently awaiting a communist revolution. And revolution was coming, but not in the way Lenin thought. Back in St. Petersburg, one of the Tsar's most skilled and influential advisors knew the country finally needed to catch up with the rest of Europe. Hey, Nick, we really got to industrialize, get more factories, and make some, I don't know, textiles or something. Won't that change the social fabric of Russia? Maybe. Hey, isn't it past your bedtime? But I haven't had my milk and snuggles yet. Will you snuggle me? Nicholas thought modernization was boring, but he let Sergei do his thing. And do his thing he did. He borrowed some money and got Russia some sexy factories. And you know what sexy factories means. Sexy workers. Dirt poor, sexy workers.
Again, brought about by class struggle and the advancement of the productive forces in general, which made industrialization a possibility, but brought upon by the public consciousness at the time and the public outcry against feudalism at the time, not something that this great leader just decided. It was something that was pushed upon him by the material conditions and by the state of the class struggle in feudal Russia.
Workers, long hours, low wages, filthy disease-ridden factories, sleep in overcrowded dormitories with all your stinky worker friends, get your arms ripped off in a freak Russian doll accident. Conditions were terrible. But this growing working class wasn't about to take it lying down. They started to do what workers...
And by instituting more capitalism, they created a proletariat. They created these angry workers who were willing to fight with the Bolsheviks against those conditions. And the proletariat ended up being, even though it was a minority class at the time in Russia, they had more peasants. The proletariat, and this was the Bolsheviks' theory, were at the lead of the revolution with the support of the peasants, who were almost like secondary forces. So this is Lenin's theory of the worker-peasant alliance. The proletariat leads and the peasants serve as an ally. And by instituting more industrialization, the czars actually helped create this proletarian class, which would then be the leading class in the revolutionary struggle. So I don't know what he means by, this isn't the way Lenin thought it would happen. This was exactly what Lenin thought, that the development of capitalism would make the conditions ripe for revolution, because it would create this disenfranchised proletariat, which is the revolutionary agent of history, the revolutionary agent within capitalist society. And then he called for an alliance between the peasants and the newly sort of developing proletariat in semi-feudal Russia. And that is exactly what happened. Right, the proletariat led the revolution, or the Bolsheviks led the revolution with the proletariat at the front and with the support of the peasants. So far, his thing about the Bolsheviks being the minority, bullshit, and his thing about the revolution not happening how Lenin thought it would, also bullshit. I mean, of course, nobody can predict the future, and Lenin himself, as time passed, he would change his thoughts and say, okay, here are the new conditions. Here's what we have to do now. Things have changed. So he didn't like lay out exactly how it would happen step by step. But in terms of having a correct theory, he was more correct than almost anybody in history. He predicted what happened in his country better than almost any theorist in all of human history, really.
Do best. Strike. Despite Sergei's efforts, people in Russia still weren't happy. Peasants were still poor, liberals still wanted reform, and now the workers wanted better working conditions. And the problem with being an autocrat is that when everyone's unhappy, there's only one person to blame. You. The people hate me. What do I do? Ooh, I know. Why don't we find a weak and pathetic nation to go to war with? We'll win easily, and everyone will love me again. Why don't we just try treating the people better? As luck would have it, an opportunity for war was forming in the Far East. Russia wanted to expand its sphere of influence into northern China, and coincidentally, so did Japan. But Japan didn't really want war, so they proposed an idea to reduce the tension.
So stupid, man. They're so stupid. And you think, how can anyone be this stupid? When your people are ready to revolt against you, how could you send them to endless stupid wars of expansion? But look at what the US is doing now. They can't stop themselves. They can't help themselves. They can't do anything except imperialist expansion. They can't do anything except what they know. Trying to maintain U.S. global hegemony, but back then trying to maintain the Russian Empire and expand it, as opposed to other empires like the British Empire and the French and Portugal and all these other countries who were fighting for territories at the time. Before World War II, you had a bunch of different competing imperialist powers. After World War II, the U.S. emerged as the dominant imperialist power. It's like, how could any leadership, how could any ruling class be so stupid to keep spending money on endless wars when the people are ready for a revolt? Look at America, man. The ruling class does what they know. They follow what the system has taught them.
Hey man, we'll let you do your thing in Manchuria if you let us do our thing in Korea. I don't think so. We've got the largest army in the world. What do you have? I'm the Emperor of Japan. I have a giant mecha suit. Whoa. Cool. Nicholas and the boys didn't see Japan as a threat, so they felt they could push Japan around. But little did they know Japan had been rapidly militarizing, and when they launched a surprise attack on a Russian fleet at Port Arthur, everyone was shocked. Nicholas hoped it was an opportunity to win a quick war and regain the support of the people. Nobody seriously thought a puny Asian country could defeat a European superpower, and the Russian people were filled with patriotic spunk. Hey everyone, we're at war with Japan! Hey everyone, we're losing the war. The Japanese won, an embarrassing defeat for Tsar Nicholas. Russia had enough problems, but now it had been internationally humiliated. The public were outraged. Unrest increased. Nicholas needed snuggles now more than ever. The tension was rising rapidly, and Russia was on the verge of revolution. All it needed was one disaster to push it over the edge, and that disaster would come in January 1905 from an unlikely source, a handsome Orthodox priest named Father Gapon. Father Gapon was leading workers and their families to the Winter Palace, but this wasn't some violent uprising. It was a peaceful protest. They wanted to deliver a petition to Nicholas, which simply asked for more.
No mention of Rasputin yet, by the way. I'm sure that's coming. I'm sure they'll make him a main character at the end of this one or in part 2.
Freedom and better working conditions. The protest was actually so peaceful and respectful that the Marxists thought it was a big waste of time. Hey Nicholas, some priest is leading a peaceful protest. Says here they want to give you a petition. A peaceful petitioning priest? I better get out of here. Nicholas had actually left the Winter Palace days earlier, and in his place they brought in a truckload of troops, ordered to stop Father Gapon from reaching the palace. Hello, good sir, and long live the Tsar. Please, allow me to pass this simple petition to our dear father, Nicholas II. Good day to you too. Please, allow us to respond by opening fire. What began as a peaceful protest ended in tragedy. Imperial soldiers opened fire on the crowd. Around 200 civilians died, 800 more were wounded. All they wanted was the opportunity to ask Nicholas to improve their lives. Instead, they were met with bullets. Nicholas didn't personally order the troops to fight.
And again, this is how we see the ruling class responding to protests today. Peaceful Palestine encampments, peaceful protests being violently broken up by police, being tear gassed, being forced out by police with riot shields. This is very common, this overreaction, this asserting of state authority that only serves to piss people off more. But nowadays, we're like more used to it. It's become like a daily occurrence that the police are beating up protesters somewhere.
Fire. But as an autocrat, he got the blame. The event became known as Bloody Sunday, and Nicholas's reputation plummeted. Strikes erupted across the empire. Workers' demands increased. Liberals demanded political power. Peasants demanded land. The country was out of control, and the 1905 revolution had begun. Listen, Nicholas, peasants seizing my land and murdering my family I can tolerate, but illegally chopping my wood, that's obscene. And the worse I treat my workers, the more they strike. I don't get it. Everyone relax. As long as the military is still on my side, there's nothing to worry about. Sir, the sailor...
That sums up the capitalist mindset right there. The worse I treat my workers, the more they strike. I don't get it. They're so ungrateful. Don't they know that without me, they would starve? Don't they know that without me hoarding all of the resources and giving them a tiny fraction of what they produce, they would starve? Why aren't they grateful to me? Me. Most narcissistic class of people that's ever existed, the bourgeoisie. The most individualistic, narcissistic possible. And they run our whole society.
Sailors are starting to mutiny. Well, my life just sucks. With Russia still losing to the Japanese, unrest was growing in the military, and some sailors had even taken to killing officers. Having the people against you is bad enough, but if the military joined in, it would be game over. To make my...
And this is where, you know how leftists sometimes say we shouldn't recruit anyone in the military? Everyone who joins the military is reactionary. Like, I get it. Yeah, they're serving imperialism, whatever. A lot of them were preyed on by recruiters when they were 18 and in poverty and had no idea about politics or world events or history or anything, which is more the fault of our education system and how the military preys on impoverished kids more than anything, more than you can blame the individual. But either way, every successful revolution has the military turn on the state. There have been socialist revolutions like Hugo Chavez in Venezuela. That was just, he was a colonel or whatever in the Venezuelan military. And they attempted a military coup. There was a military coup in Peru that was very progressive. There was a military coup recently in Niger, Mali, and of course Burkina Faso with Ibrahim Traore that have been wildly progressive, that have basically enacted socialist governments and kicked out all the Western imperialists. So realistically, strategically, to have a successful revolution, you have to win over huge sections of the military. You have to win over huge sections of the armed forces. People will also say a revolution's impossible. The military would just come quash it, right? Well, that's not how revolutions happen historically. Revolutions have been quashed historically like that, but when they've been successful, large swaths of military-age men and members of the military themselves have been turned to the side of the revolutionary forces, have been turned against the state, giving them orders once they recognize that these orders are bullshit, that they were sent to Iraq to fight for oil, or that they were sent to China to fight for Zarist imperialist expansion. So we absolutely, as the ACP, have to reach members of the military. We absolutely have to educate members of the military. We absolutely can't cancel them and say, no, you're evil and bad, and I'm making a moral judgment of you that prevents you from being a part of the communist movement because you were in an imperialist military. No, we have to show them the truth, show them the reality of the imperialist machinery, and not all of them will accept it, but some will. Nobody hates the military more than military members, especially those people who were preyed upon by recruiters when they were 18, got deployed to Syria or Afghanistan or some horrible war zone.
Matters worse. In October, workers and Marxists, including one Leon Trotsky, began setting up local elected councils called Soviets that coordinated strikes and supplied the workers. Sergei could see the writing on the wall. Things were going south fast, and he needed a big idea to save the Tsar. And luckily, he had just that. You see, all these angry people from different parts of society weren't really working together, meaning there was a weakness to exploit. Sergei wrote a manifesto that would give the liberals an elected assembly called the Duma. It took some convincing, but eventually, Nicholas agreed to share power and have his laws approved by an elected assembly. Hey, liberals, here's your stupid manifesto. Happy now? We certainly are. But what about these guys? Aren't you going to give them what they want? Oh, goodness no. I was just going to kill them. With the liberals satisfied, and after ending the war with Japan, the Tsar brought thousands of troops home, who then dismantled the Soviets, arrested their leaders, and crushed the peasant uprisings in the countryside. And how about that pesky parliament Nicholas had agreed to share power with? Well, he then wrote a bunch of new laws, which basically said, hey, remember that manifesto I wrote and how you guys were going to approve my laws? Slight change of plan. Actually, I'm going to do whatever the hell I want.
Again, the Tsar is being forced to give lip service to changing the system by class struggle and by the material conditions, but never actually making real substantive change. And this is what people point to and say, oh, the Tsars did all of the good stuff. It all happened before Lenin and Stalin. No. The people wanted what Lenin and Stalin actually did, what Lenin and Stalin actually did concretely. So the Tsar promised to do those things, but never actually did them.
And you guys are going to shut up. What? The people won't stand for this. People? What people? You know, this is why people don't like you. And just like that, Nicholas had survived the 1905 revolution. But wait, a revolution? In Russia? Where was Lenin? Well, Lenin and his communist pals were still in exile. He tried desperately to radicalize the uprising, but all he could do was watch. As the movements failed to organize, the liberals sold out the poor, and the Tsar outplayed the people. Furious.
Sounds about right, huh? That's actually another accurate representation of the 1905 revolution. The liberals sold out the people to make an alliance with the monarchs. Sounds about right, huh, folks?
He believed Russia had missed a great chance for a real revolution. From now on, he felt the only way left was an armed revolution by the workers. Watching the events of 1905 unfold, Lenin learned a lot. The Tsar, however, would prove to have learned nothing. After the 1905 revolution had failed, the Tsar's new top man was Pyotr Stolypin, and he had big ideas.
That's what I mean by Lenin was always changing his theory based upon new events. He learned so much from the 1905 revolution, the same way that Marx learned a ton from the failure of the Paris Commune, and Lenin in State and Revolution deeply analyzes and dissects Marx's analysis of the Paris Commune. So, you know, when there's a revolutionary uprising, we have to learn from it. Even in the U.S., right? We have to learn from the 2008 Occupy Wall Street protests and why they failed to do anything. I don't know if it was 2008. Maybe it started in 2008. I think it did with the crash. But anyways, we have to learn from that. We have to learn from the BLM protests and how all these uprisings were completely liberalized and the more radical leaders were taken out or imprisoned and replaced with neoliberals. These are things that we have to learn from in America, because these are genuine uprisings of the people that the communists have failed to give structure and direction to. So we have to learn from these, educate people so that the next, you know, genuine sort of naturally occurring uprising can be more scientific and more based in theory and have more direction and strategy to it based upon the failures of the past.
Ideas to prevent any more chaos. Step 1, reform agriculture. This will make the peasants love you.
Occupy was 2011. Okay, that I thought so. I thought I might have been wrong about 2008. Yeah, good call.
Step 2, we'll kill anyone who doesn't. To discourage any more revolutionary ideas, Stolypin began to crack down even harder on the Tsar's opponents, and thousands were sentenced to death. The noose even earned itself a new nickname, Stolypin's necktie. I don't get it. Oh, I see.
It was after the recovery failed to reach working class people. Got you. Interesting. Yeah, I wasn't politically active at the time. I was in like middle school, so I'm not super clear about the actual timeline. But
it goes around.
Maybe I need to study it deeper so we can learn the lessons of the Occupy Wall Street protest.
My neck. That's so funny. But despite the oppression, many positive reforms were also being made, and the Russian economy even began to improve. This was a problem for Lenin. If the people weren't suffering, then they wouldn't support a revolution. Still in exile and lacking funds, the Bolsheviks simply weren't in a position to do anything. Luckily, it was around this time that Lenin met an incredibly handsome Georgian with your second favorite historical mustache, Joseph Stalin. Lenin and
Beast!
Stalin met at a communist convention in Finland, and Lenin liked Stalin because he was a real go-getter and was great at fundraising for the Bolsheviks. And by fundraising, I mean kidnapping, robbing, extorting, bribing, ransoming, assassinating, prison breaking, stealing, bank raiding, executioning, and stealing again. He's Stalin. The Mensheviks aren't so hot in all this stealing, but
he robbed banks. He was like Robin Hood. He robbed the rich people who were robbing the country blind. He wasn't just robbing and extorting random people. Come on now. You got to ask which class was being robbed and at the benefit of which class.
we still need money. So the next time you do a big heist, just do it quietly. Okay, quietly. Got it. If this isn't quiet, I don't know what is. Stalin's wacky antics eventually got him exiled to Siberia, but he had established himself as a big balls Bolshevik. However, no amount of Bolshevik balls could stop what was happening. The Russian economy was making a recovery. For the Tsar, things were looking up. This is great. All Nicholas has to do is sit back and not mess anything up. Hey everyone, big news. I'd like to introduce you to my new best friend. He's a crazy, drunken, beardy, horny scamp.
Yeah, it showed Stalin kidnapping a child. Where's the historical evidence for that? All I know is that he was robbing banks and robbing the rich like a badass. Oh, here comes Rasputin. Finally, we get the man himself. Probably the most famous person in the entire Western world when it comes to this period of history in the Russian Revolution. More Americans probably know Rasputin than they know Lenin.
Scandal-ridden magic wizard man, and he smells
Definitely more Americans know Rasputin than they know the Tsar family. Any of them.
A goat. We're screwed. Rasputin, a dirt poor peasant from dirt poor nowhere. But unlike all the other dirt poor peasants, Rasputin had holy healing powers. And when this holy mystic wandered into St. Petersburg, people began to notice. He quickly became famous, and word of this mystery man and his healing hands made its way to the royal palace. The appearance of a holy homeless healer was of great interest to the Tsar and his wife. As far as royals go, they weren't that inbred, but they were just inbred enough for their son Alexei to get hemophilia. Or in layman's terms, Mamma mia, that's a lot of blood. Knowing Rasputin could heal people, in 1906, Alexander asked for Rasputin to come and see if he could cure their son. And crazy as it sounds, Rasputin did heal Alexei, possibly by taking him off his doctor-prescribed aspirin. Having seemingly done the impossible, Rasputin became very close to the royal family. But having a crazy homeless wizard man hanging around wasn't a good look for the Tsar, because
were they doing some polyamorous stuff? I know that's been suspected forever, but every ruling class of any system gets into some weird stuff. You know, they're just partying it up at the top. They don't have any actual real worries or concerns. They're living off the backs of everyone else in a super exploitative way, oppressing everyone else. It's like, when you fall into that kind of evil, it's like sexual degeneracy and stuff is just right around the corner. Just look at Jeffrey Epstein and all the rich American and European imperialists who have been engaging in that kind of absolutely sick, bottom of the barrel, degenerate behavior. It's not that hard to think that, you know, maybe the Tsar had an open relationship going on.
Rasputin was freaky. Not only was he a big fan of alcohol, but he'd also throw these crazy parties with Russian nobility where he'd and all night long, and then his whole head, not a guy's. And nobody knew how the goat got on the roof. Initially, the press were banned from talking about Rasputin, but eventually, the ban was lifted, and the tabloids went to town. The whole thing was a huge scandal, and everyone was freaked out that this guy was influencing the Tsar and his wife. Nicholas could have spent this period of relative peace improving his image. Instead, he spent it doing this. But as weird as the whole Rasputin thing was, so long as the economy continued to improve and people's lives...
There was a situation like this in South Korea recently where, like, South Korea had this leader who kind of instituted more central economic planning and helped industrialize and develop the country, and it pissed the U.S. off. The U.S. like didn't try to, I don't know if they overtly tried to coup them or whatever, and they were obviously still allies of South Korea because they prefer them to the DPRK. But this guy, you know, instituted a lot of socialist style central economic planning and helped develop the industry in South Korea. And then it turned out that he was being advised the whole time by like this cult leader guy, and then the leader of South Korea, his daughter ended up taking over the country later, and the weird cult leader guy said, my son is going to advise your daughter as well, right? Like, my children will advise your children and they'll have the same relationship that we did. And eventually this went public. The South Korean people found out that they were, you know, their economic policy was being devised by this weird cult leader guy, and their politics were being guided by that guy and his weird prophecy for his children to run the country. And it became a huge scandal. And I believe the president was impeached. I can't think of the people's names. There are people who could explain that way better than me, but almost like a modern Rasputin situation.
Kept getting better, maybe Nick would be okay. Maybe there would be no more revolutions. Maybe this video could even end right here. Or maybe things were about to get worse. A lot worse.
They say he slept with the wife, but maybe he got a little action with the husband too. You never know.
You see, the year is 1914, and that means it's time for World War I.
That's a good place to cut off. There you go, folks. Next week, we'll be reacting to part 2 of the Russian Revolution Oversimplified. That one wasn't too bad, actually. That was one of the better oversimplified videos I've seen. Like I said, there are a lot of people whose analysis in the lead up to the Russian Revolution is pretty good. They recognize that the czars were autocratic and the country was impoverished and it was a just revolution against oppressive forces. But then they say, you know, after the revolution, everything went to shit. Stalin was evil. Lenin became evil, blah, 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 blah. All this bullshit. So that seems to be this video. They seem to have a decent analysis of the lead up to the revolution and a decent analysis of feudal Russia. But in the next episode, I imagine I'll be pausing every 5 seconds to debunk some nonsense that they say, because they're going to start trying to demonize Lenin, Stalin, and the Bolsheviks who led the revolution against those admittedly oppressive forces. So I'm sure there will be more substance to my criticisms in part 2. Part 1 wasn't actually that bad. A few things to criticize, a few things they got wrong, but not too bad. So I'm excited for part 2. Hopefully people enjoyed that one. And yeah, keep debunking these YouTube history videos that are full of shit. Brazilians aquí. Evening, comrades. Thank you so much, David. Good evening to you, my friend. Hope you're doing well, brother. OG Midwestern Marx patron right here. Well, folks, this was a good stream. I went way longer than I thought I would. 2 hours and 30 minutes. Holy cow. Certainly not the Eddie Liger power hour today. The Eddie Liger 2.5 hours. But thank you all for hanging out today. Thank you so much for the super chatters. If you want to support us without having YouTube steal your money, patreon.com/MidwesternMarx. Thank you so much to Red Maze for the giant super chats today. I am going to go purchase a drone on behalf of the ACP media department now, which will be used to produce a lot of pro-communist content. So thank you so much to Red Maze and all the other donors. Your money will go to good use, I promise. Speaking of which, we got another $15 donation right before we end the show. Thank you so much, Starside. Thanks for hanging out today and asking good questions, being active in the chat. Appreciate that always. And thank you so much for the $15. It goes a long way. Really appreciate that. Every dollar helps. So thank you so much. Red Maze for the win. Yes. Yeah, shout out to Red Maze. And I'm excited for the content that we're going to be bringing you guys soon. From the new drone, the ACP drone. I got to put an ACP sticker on the drone. I love putting ACP stickers on stuff. When we do our community events, sometimes we put ACP stickers on these big trucks. It's so cool seeing the ACP trucks. One day we'll have an ACP private jet too, but a drone is a good start. So thank you all for hanging out. I'm getting tired and delirious now. But make sure to subscribe, like, comment, all that stuff. Patreon.com/MidwesternMarx, MidwesternMarx.com to see our books and journals. Check out the Red America Journal at acp.us. And if you want to join the party and fight on behalf of the American working class, acp.us/join. But that's all from me, folks. Thank you so much. Solidarity forever.
Stand up, victims of oppression, for the tyrants fear your mind. Don't cling so hard to your possessions, for you have nothing if you have no right. Let racist ignorance be ended, for respect makes the empires fall. Freedom is me, privilege extended, and lessons go on and on. So come brothers, sisters, for the strong, carries on. The international, unite the world in song. So comrades, for this is the time to pay. The international unites the great. There's no one built to hide us. Walls of hatred, no walls of stone. Come breathe, the dawn and stand beside. Together we'll die alone. In our world, high exploitation. Those who have taken, now they must give. And the nations but one urge to live. So come brothers, sisters, for the strong, carries on. The international unites the world in song. So comrades, for this is the time to pay. We stand proud before them. We defy their guns and sheep. When we fall by their oppression, we survive by life and law. For they are unite the world in song.